Okay, so shall we kick off? How's broadcasting in Hansard? All good, thanks very much. All right, I declare open this Hello, Doctor. I declare open this public hearing of the Senate Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport Legislation Committee. The Senate has referred to the committee the particulars of proposed expenditure for 2022-23 and related documents for the Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry portfolio. The committee may also examine the annual reports of the departments and agencies appearing before it. The committee has before it a program listing agencies relating to matters for which senators have given notice, and the proceedings today will begin with an examination of the Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry portfolio. The committee has fixed Friday, the 16th of December 2022 as the date for return of answers to questions taken on notice. Senators are encouraged to provide any written questions on notice to the committee secretariat by the 22nd of September 2022. Under Standing Order 26, the committee must take all evidence in public session. This includes answers to questions on notice. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee that you are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on the account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to a committee. The Senate, by resolution in 1999, endorsed the following test of relevance of questions at estimates hearings. And that is, any questions going to the operations or financial positions of the departments and agencies which are seeking funds in the estimates are relevant questions for the purpose of estimates hearings. I remind officers that the Senate has resolved that there are no areas in connection with the expenditure of public funds where any person has a discretion to withhold details or explanations from the Parliament or its committees unless the Parliament has expressly provided otherwise. The Senate has resolved also that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. I particularly draw the attention of witnesses to an order of the Senate from the 13th of May 2009 specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised. Witnesses are specifically reminded that a statement that information or a document is confidential or consists of advice to government is not a statement that meets the requirements of the 2009 order. Instead, witnesses are required to provide some specific indication of the harm to the public interest that could result from the disclosure of the information or the document. An officer called to answer a question for the first time should state their full name and the capacity in which they appear, and witnesses should speak clearly and into the microphones to assist Hansard to record proceedings. Could I please remind everyone present to switch off their mobile phones or render them inaudible? Senators, departments and agencies have been provided with advice on the arrangements in place to ensure the budget estimates 2022-23 hearings are conducted in a safe environment. This guidance is also available from the Secretariat. The committee appreciates the cooperation of all attendees in adhering to these arrangements. I now welcome Senator the Honourable Murray Watt, Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry and Minister for Emergency Management, and Mr Andrew Metcalfe AO, Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. Minister or Mr Metcalfe, do you wish to make an opening statement?
Not today, thanks, Chair.
Righto, well, let's go straight to questions and welcome, good to see you again, Doctor, and your crew from Fisheries Research and Development Corporation. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
No, thank you.
You dyed your hair grey since we last seen you. Oh, I couldn't help that. I mean, I've still got a little bit. We've been around a long time doing this, haven't we, Doctor? So, Senator Canavan. Oh no, of course, Senator Dunham.
Thank you, Chair, very much.
My apologies.
Dr Hone and Chair, good to see you both, and thanks for coming along. I wanted to just start with the KPIs relating to RDCs that were developed and are in the process of being put in place. And particularly just in relation to the best practice guide on stakeholder consultation. That's one I presume the FRDC's done a bit of work on. And is that one that has been published to the RDC's website and is in the process of being deployed as part of what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. I just recognise the Ngunnawal and Ngambri lands that which we meet on today. Yes, it's all on FRDC's website. Go to About FRDC, About Statutory Funding Agreement, and you'll find all the reports there. It's very pleasing. We've just got our first year report back on how we performed. There were 4 areas of improvement that we've been asked to address. But yes, they are all available on the website.
Oh, very good. Well, just on that, and that looked pleasing that a broadly positive response in terms of the...
Bless you.
Yes, bless you indeed. Yeah. The KPIs, just the 4 areas of improvement, without labouring through the detail, what are those areas that require improvement?
For the improvement?
Yeah.
So with us, because we have that very broad matrix of stakeholders, Indigenous was the number 1, which was about... we have a very effective Indigenous reference group, as you might be aware of.
Yes.
But unfortunately, with Indigenous, you need a much broader stakeholder group. You must much more regionally focused. So there's the requirement to try and ask the question: how do we engage better in the groupings, the different groups that the Indigenous have? And that's something that clearly we need to improve. There's another component around improving our reporting on some of the key statistics around how our research is actually having a cost-benefit impact. Because some of our research, as you are aware, has social and environmental considerations and it's not as easy to measure. So there's a requirement there to look at that. So yes, there's a range. And the other 2 were really around more process, just getting the process in terms of how we got the data appropriately aligned on the website.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, having worked closely with you and your team and the chair, I know that you'll put every effort into making sure that any areas of improvement are met. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate the information. I just want to go to work with state and territory governments in particular, and just the interaction you have there. Is it something that happens on a regular basis, or is it more ad hoc if a state or territory government seeks to make a decision around fisheries management? Do they often refer to the FRDC and the work that it does to inform their decision-making process or cooperate?
Yep. So the Senate would be aware that we have 8 jurisdictions that we work with, which includes Commonwealth fisheries, states and territories. They have a very structured approach to how we engage, and we also have a less informal approach as well, which right. So the most structured approach is through the Australian Fisheries Management Forum, which is a grouping of all the directors of fisheries. They meet regularly. We've got another meeting coming up in beginning of December. They have a whole range of working groups. We're on some of those working groups. For example, there's an Indigenous working group, a data working group, fish stats working group. And so we report to them on the research that informs it. FRDC is an observer to that group with CSIRO. So our goal is basically to make sure that the science is available. Then we have in each state, territory and the Commonwealth, we have things called research advisory committees. Each of the jurisdictions is also on the research advisory committees, and that they meet regularly. That all of them just met in the last month or 2. We're just about to go to the call on all the priorities that they have identified. The reason to try and align them is that often you'll find that 2 states will have a similar priority, so it's the opportunity to get that partnership across territories. But they are the 2 main approaches. We have a lot of interaction. Obviously, we often talk about the directors of fisheries as being, one of the most important pathways to adoption for us, because a lot of our work works in public resource. So it's very important that we are attuned to what they're talking.
Sure. Plus all the informal interactions that I know the FRDC has.
One of them sitting behind me.
Yeah. In particular, I just want to go to a 2014 piece of work entitled utilising innovative technology to better understand Spanish mackerel spawning aggregations and the protection offered by marine protected areas. And in that, the findings that this piece of work brought about in terms of best managing the populations. Has any additional research been done since that point in time on this particular fish stock?
So we've just funded a new project on Spanish mackerel. Spanish mackerel, like a lot of fish stocks, are unique. We like to think that all fish stocks are the same, but they have a particular attribute around them.
Wouldn't that be easy if they were all the same?
Their ability to be hyperstable, in terms of how we actually measure their biomass, and to a point where we're not as confident about their biomass is a problem. So we are trying to come up with a improved stock assessment methodology. And that's with the Queensland rec sector, Queensland commercial sector, charter sector and the agency in Queensland. And that just got announced recently.
Yes, okay. So when is that due to report?
So that project's got a series of staged milestones over the next 3 to 4 years. We have made the undertaking that we are going to try and publish the interim milestone reports as actually papers to actually inform the process, because this is a fishery, as you know, is going through some significant management change at the moment, which are relatively controversial in terms of their impact on different stakeholders. So it's important that we get that data out as quickly as possible. So we have made an undertaking. We don't normally publish milestones, but we're trying to keep basically track of what's happening.
Sure, and it's those management changes I wanted to come to, because obviously, which is why I asked about the interaction and cooperation between FRDC and states and territories. I mean, the Queensland Government has made a decision. As far as I can tell, based on what I've read there, the most recent FRDC research was from 2014. A decision was made, which is having a range of impacts. I just want to refer to a paper or a peer review by Dr. Neil Clare. Are you familiar with him? Yes. Relating to the stock assessment for the East Coast Spanish mackerel in Queensland, and it was quite critical of the decision. Has FRDC had a look at Dr. Clare's work, his peer review? I mean, is that being considered in the recently commenced work that you're doing with the states, or the state, I should say?
I don't want to make any comment about the management process. We are not a management agency. We just provide the science. Their Spanish mackerel are across the whole of Northern Australia. So obviously WANT, they go into the Indian Pacific. They're a wide-ranging stock. What's happening off the north east of our coastline in Queensland at the moment is obviously a problem. It's something that we didn't probably anticipate. The early research gave us some indication, which is that early 2014-15 research that you're referring to, Senator. At the moment, there is a range of hypotheses. So there's the work that Cyro's put out, a recent paper. There's the work that you've mentioned, Dr. Clare's put out. The purpose of our research is to try and look at those various questions that other scientists have posed and try to address that uncertainty. So yes, the science, hopefully, I'm not convinced. It's a bit like what's happening with snapper in South Australia, demersal finfish in WA. It's still very hard as scientists to understand the actual causal factors. We often measure the symptoms. So we're trying to find out what actually is the cause in this instance, so that we can understand what is the handle to pull, because it sometimes mightn't be fishing is the handle.
Yes, and
if that makes sense.
We make a decision to pull the handle in the other direction by way of changes to regulation, it can have pretty, I don't expect you to comment on that, Dr. Home, but it can have pretty significant impacts on communities and the economy. So just on Queensland, before I move very quickly to WA, was any, through the formal channels that FRDC operates in, with the Queensland Government in particular, through the research advisory committees or through the AFMF, is that right, Australian Fisheries
Management Forum?
Yes. Was any further information sought before the decision was made by the Queensland Government on the Spanish mackerel?
I'm not aware of what the Queensland Government, other information they sought.
And, well, in particular requests of FRDC?
I'm aware that at the Australian Fisheries Management Forum we did discuss Spanish mackerel as we've discussed other species of concern, so that all the directors of fisheries are aware of what their own... we have basically a state roundup, and Territory and the Commonwealth roundup about what the issues are to try and share learnings, approaches, etc. I'm not aware, and neither should I be aware, of what the Queensland Government's done with WA.
Yes. Yeah, just
The
Queensland.
Queensland.
So my question
Question
was,
was Queensland, yeah.
Queensland,
Yep.
did they ask the FRDC for any further research before making the decision around Spanish mackerel? We'll come to WA in a moment.
Did they ask us to do... there was a priority put through to the Research Advisory Committee, which is the project we've now funded.
Yes.
That was informed by the Queensland Government priority, plus the industry providing advice to that
Sure.
committee.
But not in order to inform the state government's decision on this fishery?
Not the current decision, no.
Sure,
The
okay.
future outcome, yes.
Yes, okay. So they've made a decision and then have asked for research. Understood. Excellent. Just to WA then, although I shouldn't say excellent, just in terms
it's
of
not
the
excellent.
demersal... No, it's not excellent at all. It's far from. And making decisions without data is very, very dangerous. Demersal scale fisheries, particularly pink snapper and the dewfish, the decisions that have been made there, was there any advice sought by the Western Australian Government of the FRDC through the formal channels?
No.
Okay. All right, that answers that for me. Thank you very much,
Thank
Amalami.
you, Senator Dunham. And look, I've got to take this opportunity to sincerely welcome former Senator John Williams to the screen. Wacker, in your new position as well, you've been there a while now, and I couldn't think of a better person to be the chairman of FRDC. And I've just got to say this, I truly, from a committee point of view and a friend, we do miss you, Senator Williams. Your input on this committee over the years has been extraordinary. Your workload representing producers and processors, and you're dearly missed down here, and also your partner in crime, Senator O'Sullivan from Queensland. But welcome, Wacker, anyway. Senator Bushwell.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, and I'd support all that except the last bit about Senator O'Sullivan.
Oh,
So welcome,
nice. Come
welcome, ex-Senator Williams. So could
Thank
I,
you, Senator.
fellow Royal Commission into Banks Inquisitor, yeah, we do miss you, Wacker. Could I ask just to start with about the we've got AFMA up next. I'll be asking for an update on the $24 million structural adjustment assistance package. Could I ask Mr. Hone, what's been FRDC's involvement with the South East Trawl in the last decade? How much research have we been doing on the stocks that have essentially collapsed?
I'm going to have to take that on notice to give you a complete report. The South East Trawl is an incredibly important fishery. It provides an affordable seafood supply to most of Australia, and therefore it's quite a really important fishery. And so we do a lot of research. So to actually give you a number on all the research right now would be, but I'm happy to give you a complete report if you'd like.
Particularly, I know there's the regular TACs that are set in a different process, but obviously there's 5 or 6 species there, jackass morwong being one of them, where recruitment's failed. This has come from AFMA directly. They've named up climate change as being a contributing factor. The question, I suppose, the average punt on the street, Scott, is how did it get to this? How do we get to the point where 5 or 6 species that are essentially non-target, not necessarily high-value species, have been pushed to the point where we now need to buy up capacity in the fishery? Has you done any specific projects on those bycatch species?
So I think the question's about the management and what the response is an AFMA question. In terms of the broader question about impact on climate change, there has been a lot of work, as you were aware, like Beth Fulton in the southeast, trying to understand...
So she's with CSIRO?
CSIRO, trying to understand what are the consequences of global warming, ocean temperature increases, etc., and what that could impact on stocks. It's underpinned by research like the Atlantis modelling, etc. The problem with...
That's used for setting TACs though, right?
No, Landsat because there's a lot of things that informs a TAC.
Correct.
So a lot of that science is used. It's right now Beth Fulton is running a workshop around the country to distribute to all the states, territories and Commonwealth the handbook for fisheries managers on climate change, trying to improve how we actually incorporate climate change into stock assessments, into process. It's reasonable to say that that's still an evolving process in all jurisdictions, and I think we're basically in an adaptive learning phase where, from a science perspective, we're trying to understand what's the best science to inform.
Now, Mr. Hone, you've been around a long time and you're a scientist yourself and you know fisheries very well. Why has it taken so long for this process to begin, considering we knew climate change was on us at least a decade ago and we started seeing changes to our oceans? Why has it taken so long for fisheries to go through a process to adapt to climate change?
So, Senator, I would really prefer not to have an opinion on other people's decisions, if possible.
Well, okay, could I ask specifically, has it been raised with FRDC in the last decade that climate change is going to have impacts on fisheries like the South East Trawl and how we could adapt to that? Was this raised in recent years?
So I would point to our 2010 climate change submission on fisheries to this House, that we actually documented at the time some of the possible impacts. Now, that was still a learning science. Remember, that's the science from 2000 to 2010 that informed that. At that time, we were working on a piece of work which was possible case studies on impacts of climate change, and that did indicate that we would have stocks of concern.
Okay, and can you tell us quickly what those, was there any particular stocks that were raised as being of concern?
I'm not going to go through all of them,
No,
but for example, we
yeah.
did case studies, for example, Southern Rock Lobster.
Yep.
By 2050, we were concerned that recruitment could decrease as much as 50%.
Okay. And obviously there's been ups and downs in the last decade with Western Rock Lobster and
Correct.
the Tasmanian fishery and others. So there was, have you been, in terms of your funding and your research priorities, was there any specific projects that FRDC led on in relation to the ecosystem-based approaches to fisheries management?
This is Dorothy Dix, isn't it, about how much work we've done at EBFM. So
Well,
ecosystem-based
The
fisheries...
next question is it working, Mr. Hone?
That's a very good question. So our basically number one priority in life is to have sustainable fish stocks and healthy marine habitats. Part of that is understanding the broader ecosystem, including cumulative impacts, what are the drivers for change. That's why I also chair the National Marine Science Committee, because we're very embedded in the Marine Science Committee. We're very embedded in actually understanding the processes that are undertaken both in freshwater environments and aquatic, and also the interface at land and water. And that's why, if you have a look at our portfolio right now, I think as a percentage of our budget, FRDC has more research going into ecosystem environment research than any other relative.
How long has this trend been? How long has that been occurring?
Since 1991. It's like the whole reason FRDC was set up, including our alternative funding model, which requires us to fund public good research, was to make sure that we were investing. Now, has that actually had the impact? I would say there's been some great successes in terms of our science. I would point to improvements in things like the introduction of harvest strategies, our improved modelling, our ability to do harvest strategy evaluation, predictive models, the great work of CSIRO with Atlantis, the great capacity of our science fraternity. When I first started, I was the only fisheries scientist at SA Fisheries. Now they've got something like 120 scientists. So just our science capacity alone has increased. We're now best in class, I personally believe, in the world. And we don't just contribute to Australian science, but also internationally, which is where you do that peer review to make sure that you are delivering.
So what is your interface with AFMA and the management of fisheries then? If, for example, the South East Trawl, there's been issues there for at least a decade that people have been very prominent and well understood. Why have, for example, the criticisms that stocks have been consistently overestimated?
So I can talk about the process. So the process is we are on the AFMA research committee as an observer, which is we appreciate being there. We also have a research advisory committee for Commonwealth Fisheries, and we manage that ourselves. AFMA are a member of that, so is Department of Ag, Fish and Forestry, so is Rec Sector, Indigenous, etc. on that committee. That group does bring together priorities, and we have got another priority right now looking at additional research around a cruise in the southeast. You might be aware of the investigator cruise that we're talking about, which is to try and understand some of these biological parameter issues that we've got. Are they dynamic, non-dynamic? So
in relation to the East Australian current?
East Australian
particular?
current, correct.
Okay. So if you've, I know you don't manage the fisheries yourself, but you do provide valuable input on many levels that you've just outlined, plus your research projects. You're probably aware the Auditor General recently didn't give AFMA a very good tick in the box for their ecosystems frameworks. And this is an issue I remember the Borthwick Review talking about over 10 years ago. Why is it that the Fisheries Management Authority still hasn't got an acceptable framework in place for an ecosystems?
I think you need to ask that for
Dr.
AFMA.
Hone could actually answer that.
Yeah, I can't answer that.
Well, technically then, have you provided any advice to AFMA on their framework for an ecosystems-based approach to fisheries?
So, as you're
Specifically?
aware, AFMA already and all the states run a variety of ecosystem research techniques that goes into their management approaches. It gets assessed under the EPBC Act when we do the strategic assessments. There's that component. So there's a lot of work that goes into ensuring that we don't just look at the stocks, we look at the broader ecosystem.
Okay. Look, I'll put some more questions to you on notice, but could I just go through just some questions, follow-up questions I asked in the last estimates around the Storm Bay, the salmon research, the reports. So the biochemical modelling, you mentioned there was two particular reports that we talked about that you said were extended to 18 months. So there was the Storm Bay biochemical modelling and the decision support tools. You said so that was back in February this year. I just wanted to check because you mentioned also a bit later on. I didn't pick it up when I was questioning. That there would be, they would be peer reviewed. Does that 18-month extension include the peer review process? Or
Correct.
It does. So that by that stage
They're having the peer review right now.
They're being peer reviewed right now. Okay. So any changes to that time frame in terms of when they'll be made public?
I'm anticipating they'll be published before Christmas.
Great. Okay. And another thing when I was going back to read over the transcripts, I was asking. Kind of around transparency and whether you'd heard from the public around their concerns about the fact these reports hadn't been released or they weren't accessible. But you did mention that you'd received some feedback from the community about some work you were doing about onshore, potential onshore salmon development. Just wondering are you doing any research at all in Tasmania about whether it's economic or sustainability around onshore salmon farming?
I think I might take that on notice. We're certainly not doing any research currently on Atlantic salmon onshore. We have zero research currently on that, and I cannot recall the answer to that question that would indicate to you that we were doing. So
I said. So you said in relation to a question I asked around correspondence from community, the only thing I've had is from Peter. You didn't mention his surname, from
Peter
the Action
George.
Group. He wanted some information out of the aquaculture industry about what we're doing with land-based work. He was just trying to understand where we were going with that, and that is the only community contact I've had. So I just triggered my interest about land-based work, if you were doing any land-based work at all.
The answer is no.
The answer is no. Okay, no worries. And in relation to some of the other questions I asked you around the hydrodynamic modelling, you mentioned, especially in relation to Storm Bay, you mentioned that would be released publicly because there's concerns there around handfish that I'm sure you're very familiar with, and you did mention that's not your That's the National Environmental Science Program that's dealing with that. But you seem adamant that the hydrodynamic modelling would be released. Is that still the case?
Correct.
And do you know when that would be?
That's the same, hopefully before Christmas.
Before Christmas. Okay. Okay, I think that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Whish-Wilson. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd just like to echo the outpouring of love for former Senator Williams. Good to see you. I can't quite back Senator Sterle's suggestion that you're the best FRDC chair ever. As a Queenslander, I've got to recognise Ron Boswell as well, Wacker, but you are very, very good.
Same farm, different paddock.
Can I ask, I just wanted to return to the Spanish mackerel issue briefly. There is, you might be aware, Dr. Hone, there is quite a bit of controversy about stock assessments that have occurred. And I just wanted to clarify, have you done any assessment of the stock or sustainable catch for Spanish mackerel in Queensland fisheries area, or are you going to do that? I was a little unclear.
So just to be clear, we don't manage stocks, and we also don't do stock assessments.
You don't do it? Okay.
But we do research to inform improvements in stock assessments.
Right.
And we also do an independent assessment of the status of fish stocks, which is the SAFS report, status of fish stocks, which actually reviews the stock assessments and actually comes up with our indication.
Okay, and have you reviewed the stock assessment that's been done by the Queensland government for the Spanish mackerel recently?
We haven't reviewed the stock assessment.
Are you going to do that?
The next version of the status of Australian fish stocks is now underway, with the report next year. Next year.
Any particular month, roughly?
Well, we're probably hoping for around November.
Okay, right, so about a year away. Okay.
That's my colleague, Crispin Ashby. Thank you.
Okay, oh yes. Had you introduce yourself? Maybe you want to do that?
Sorry, Crispin Ashby, General Manager for Research Investment.
Thank you, Mr. Ashby. Can I just go to then, just briefly, I know we're over time. It seems to me that the controversial issue here is I don't know if they've changed their modelling, but certainly there's a controversy around what the experts call steepness in the stock assessment methodology. You're nodding your head, so I'm not. Yep. It's Greek to me, but I'm wondering what is this character? What is steepness, and why does it have such an impact on stock assessments? I'm particularly looking at a paper, I don't know if you've seen, by I think he's Dr. Neil Clare.
Yep.
It's an independent assessment of the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries stock assessment for Spanish mackerel, and he says that it's, quote, it's been long recognised that steepness is highly influential but uncertain parameter for fisheries stock assessments. Spanish mackerel do not fit the profile of a species likely to allow robust steepness estimation. He goes on to conclude, and I quote, "I'm unable to support the conclusions regarding future harvest levels for the East Coast Spanish mackerel stock until reservations regarding the most appropriate central value for steepness for the base case are resolved." Obviously, it's a fairly clear conclusion from Mr. Clare, but can you just explain what is steepness and why is this such a controversial situation in stock assessments?
So in stock assessment, we're trying to count something we can't see.
Right.
So we're trying to use data to inform a population. In this case, what we're trying to understand is what's the breeding biomass and the degree to which that breeding biomass can support future recruitment.
Right.
We use
recruitment. What does that mean?
So that's juveniles coming through into the fishery.
Okay.
So because it's got a legal size limit, we can see that cohort coming through every year. We can see different cohorts. And so our goal with most fisheries is there's an assumption of uniformity, that the stock's distributed evenly, that it has biological parameters that allow it to spawn and reproduce every year. But some species have unique properties. And their properties also change through time depending on the conditions. So in the case of Spanish mackerel, it's clear that some of the assumptions we had around the decline in biomass, in terms of how stable that biomass and at what point it inflected, so that actually the biomass started to decline as a result of the impact of fishing or other factors, because we're not sure if it's other factors, that we're all trying to understand is what is that rate of decline?
Is that the steepness?
And that's part of the steepness.
Part of the steepness, okay.
And so what we're trying to understand in this next project is getting a better handle on those biological parameters to inform that stock assessment.
And look, just finally, just an overarching question. What I'm concerned about, these changes, the closure of Barramundi, while Barramundi catch, is that we continually seem to be becoming more and more reliant on imported seafood, when we have some of the largest ocean territory in the world. It's ridiculous. Does anyone collect data on how much seafood we import every year and how much we're actually eating domestically? Do you do that? Anyone?
So just looking to my left.
Mr. Metcalf, does anyone do this? Does anyone?
So ABARES does a report on imports and exports. As part of that, they're currently estimating that 70%.
We heard the Senate inquiry the other day, repeatedly.
I think we heard it
Do you want to take that?
It's been about 70%.
I'll pass it to
there at the same
Rosemary.
time.
That's right. Back to the future.
Sorry.
Rosemary Denninger, Deputy Secretary, Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. ABARES do have a range of data collections. I'll just have to see if I can come back later in the
That's
hearing
all right. Take it on
specifically.
notice.
ABS may also collect some data as well.
Happy for you to take that
I'll
on
just
note.
add one thing,
Yes.
Senator Canavan. I share your concern, and you're probably aware the government made an election commitment to bring in mandatory country of origin labelling, which is something that the industry has been seeking for a very, very, very long time. I've said to the industry I had a bit to do with this issue when I was in the state government in Queensland more than 10 years ago, and so when I got back to this portfolio I was pretty shocked to hear that it hadn't been done. So we've made that commitment.
We'll give you the whole history,
I'll give you
Minister.
full support, Senator Watt. I wish you all the best with the
We'll tell you
states, and the
what.
Food and Grocery Council and Hotel Association. But,
Indeed.
I'm right 100% behind
Well,
you.
we're a government that keeps our commitment, Senator Canavan. I
Not
look
all
forward
of
to you
them.
joining me in
I hope you
backing
keep
that in
this one. I hope you keep this one. All right. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Canavan. That's a great announcement, Minister Watt, because Senator Wishworth and I were getting beaten up from all sides last time, weren't we? So that's a great announcement. All right, Dr. Hayne, cheerio.
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Senator Wishworth, you wanted one
Just
conclusion? Sorry.
two quick questions. And Mr. Hone was a champion for getting country of origin labelling. But I remember the inquiry that you came along, we had the workshop in Sydney, the fish markets. But could I ask Minister, just in relation to the country of origin labelling, will we get other information about the imported seafood in that, or is it your expectation that we'll have a framework to get information about where that fish was landed, you know, how it was, its species, how it was caught?
All of that is still, all of that is still being considered, Senator Bush-Wilson. It's actually, the work on this is actually going to be led out of the industry department, but we're obviously closely engaged in it. There's a consultation process about to begin. I mean, I guess I have thought of it mainly focusing on being what it says, which is what is the current country that the item has come from, but I accept that there's broader sustainability, traceability type issues involved. And
Is this in relation to fisheries in particular you're talking about, or just general country of origin labelling?
no, well, the commitment was about seafood.
See, well, as you're probably aware, some of this stuff's caught in the EEZ and
Yep.
it's no country of origin at
Yeah.
all. So that kind of information.
We would have to come up with a way through the consultation process of addressing that sort of issue. But really, we're at a pretty early stage. We made the election commitment. We've now put money in the budget to do the work. The consultation will begin, and they're the kind of issues we'll have to work through.
Well, it's a very good Senate report sitting there gathering dust.
Too right.
For many years
Better go
ago
and have a look at
that
it.
looked at all this stuff. Just my other question, just Mr. Hone, just also asking for an update. After I asked you about Centra Stephanus last time, I have met with Ian Dutton in Tasmania, and I understand there's a big workshop in February. Could you just give us an update on if there's been any kind of further research projects you've been engaged in relation to Centra Stephanus or habitat, or habitat restoration or loss?
There's a lot going on in Centra Stephanus, but there's a lot going on the Southern Reef, as you are aware.
The Great Southern Reef?
Yeah, as we're obviously concerned about the kelp, we're understanding about the recruitment of lobsters, abalone and urchin. So there's lots happening. There's a new project to review and assess all the research that we've done in New South Wales down into Victoria, which is being led by Dr. Neil Andrews. So that report will...
Over the last 20 years.
Over the last 20 years, and you actually alluded...
I've got a list of all those reports, by the way, if you need them.
Yeah, thank you. So the goal is to try... Neil's really an excellent scientist, not just to look at the science, but ask where the gaps are, and also ask that question, given the knowledge we had, did we do the right advice in terms of how the management should evolve, like in kelp recovery, it's those sorts of things. And also look at some of the issues around whether commercial fishing actually had the intended effect. So that's the work that Neil's working on. We've got the remaining work that's happening down in Tasmania right now, looking to try and improve the economic outcomes from the urchin fishery to try and make sure that it can go into fertilisers and other components. And then obviously we've just funded the workshop. That's not...
You're funding that workshop, are you? in
So
February?
it's a joint project with NRE, with Ian Dutton, who's the Director of Fisheries down there. We're trying to bring in quite a lot of international expertise, and Senator, like you, we're observing that the Great Barrier Reef has a lot of science that they developed around crown of thorns that we could apply in terms of biological control, direct action, plus also automation in terms of artificial intelligence, etc. So we're looking at what we can learn. We're also trying to learn from the Californians about what they've done with their urchin. So we're trying to bring all of those people to that workshop. Preceding that workshop is also the International Temperate Reef Conference, which is in January, which is going to bring together the world's best temperate reef scientists.
And where is that? Mr.
That's
Hunt?
also in Hobart.
Good.
Which
I
is
might be able
just
to go to that.
followed by the International Seaweed Conference, which will look at
I'm
things
definitely
like
going to that.
restoration and seaweeds, etc. So there's a 4-week period in Tasmania where between temperate reefs, seaweed and restoration, and then finally asking the question after we've heard all that, what can we do better? That's the purpose of that workshop.
Could I ask, and this is up to you, Mr. Hone, or to the Minister, I noticed there was a budget item in the last budget for a new, marine research centre in Queensland. I can't remember the exact name of it. Is FODC involved in that as a stakeholder? Are you aware of what they're going to be researching?
So I'm aware of the new one in Central Queensland.
Sorry, what's it called?
Is that the one? Yeah, is that the one attached to Central Queensland University?
Correct.
CMERC, I think it's called.
Yeah. So
Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was part of the broader reef funding package that we
Right.
took to the last election, and it included, I feel like it was around $6 million or somewhere like that to establish that centre. But is the question whether FRDC is involved?
That was my first question, and my next question, I suppose, there is a Great Southern Reef that needs funding too. I know the Barrier Reef is very deserving of the funding it gets, but is there any thoughts about potential funding for a holistic, like for example, a marine invasive species centre, or a Great Southern Reef Centre of Excellence?
Not that
based
I'm
in the
aware.
south?
Not that I'm aware of at this point, at least, Senator Bush-Wilson. I'm happy to consider that along with a whole bunch of other things.
course.
But I do remember that one of the reasons we made the commitment for that research centre in Gladstone was to make sure that there was effort going into the entire Barrier Reef. I think a lot of people tend to think of the Cairns Port Douglas area when they think of the Great Barrier Reef, and that's a really important area, but it's much, much longer than that, and we wanted to make sure that we were also thinking about some of the issues on the southern Barrier Reef. But I take your point, it's not the only reef there in the country, and we should think about others.
Indeed, I'd argue the Great Southern Reef is equally as important, and certainly is in terms of its contribution to the economy and a whole range of other metrics. It's just, you've obviously got AIMS, you've got James Cook University, you've got lots of great research institutions up on the Barrier Reef, as we do in Tasmania, but there is a call, especially from scientists, to have and take a new approach to funding and to working across disciplines, including with FRDC and fisheries and CSIRO and a whole range of institutions. So I just wanted to put that on your
Sure.
your
It's
agenda.
probably also worth taking up with the Environment Department as well, because
I've been
that
trying.
funding, that
been
funding
trying.
has obviously come through there.
Thank you. Cheers.
Right, that's it. Okay, Dr. Hone, thank you very much. Mr. Williams, Cheerio, good to see you again. Thank you very much. And yes,
Thanks for
sorry.
coming, Waka.
Thanks, Chair, and best wishes to all the senators there.
See you, Waka.
I bet you're missing this, mate. Sorry.
Like a hole in the head.
There are two particularly relevant publications. One is called Fisheries and Aquaculture Statistics 2020, and the other is Australia's Trade in Fisheries and Aquaculture Products. I'll work with the Secretariat to provide those links, and then the information is available in there on those matters. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. We'll let you go. We'll now call officials from AFMA. No, I've never had the list, right? Only because I can't see. Thanks, mate. What have you done with Mr McKinley? Is he still around? Oh. Okay, there you go. All right, I welcome officials from Australian Fisheries Management Authority. And Senator Duniam, do you wish to kick off?
I will, thank you. I
Jerry.
presume there was no
Thanks very
opening
much,
statement
mate.
or anything like that. No? Okay, excellent. Brilliant, very good. Well, good to see you, Mr Norris, Ms Willock and team. Thanks for coming. Obviously, Camellar's just finished. Is there a readout on any key happenings at Camellar that occurred over the last week or two?
Wes Norris, Chief Executive Officer, Australian Fisheries Management Authority. Thanks very much for the question, Senator. Good to see you. Camellar finished at the end of last week. Camellar is the international organisation for managing marine resources in Antarctica. It's always a challenging forum, and this year was no exception. I think you would say that overall the results were a mixed bag. In terms of Australia's fisheries interests, they were good outcomes. Australia secured an increase in the total allowable catch for ice fish in Heard Island and McDonald Islands, and access to the exploratory fishery in the Ross Sea, which was two items that could have gone either way.
Indeed, and have in the past. So all round, pretty happy with the outcomes is the broad assessment. Okay, excellent. All right, if I can go then quickly to foreign fishing vessels and IUU fishing. Can you tell me, in the course of the current financial year, how many foreign fishing vessels have been intercepted in our waters?
Yeah, thank you. So as of about 3 o'clock this morning,
Glad you were up.
46 have been intercepted this financial year, including the destruction of 5 of those vessels at sea.
And 5 have been destroyed at sea?
Correct.
Okay, all right. And these vessels, typically, where are we finding they are presently coming from, of the 46 at the moment?
So the vast majority are Indonesian vessels that are coming down from ports like Roti and Kupang.
Sure, okay. And based on previous years, because I think, if I understand correctly, so 21-22 we saw 231 incursions, is that correct? Or interceptions at least?
I think the final figure was actually 337.
337, okay. That's significant. But so therefore 46 is a reduction, at least in pro rata terms, on that number. What do you put that down to? What are the influencing factors in their ports of departure that are pushing them out or keeping them on shore?
So I think there's been a range of push and pull factors. I spoke about a couple of them at our last hearing. Very heavily driven by COVID, in that COVID has resulted in greater push factors from the Indonesian side, things like wholesale closure of tourist venues and people moving back into regional villages and ports. Equally, that part of Indonesia was very heavily damaged by a cyclone early last year, or late 2020, sorry, I can't remember. and so that has implications for livelihoods and food security as well. On our side, particularly early in the pandemic, COVID very significantly curtailed the enforcement ability of Maritime Border Command assets that were out at sea, because obviously couldn't undertake boarding and inspection and things for quite some time. So I think those are the drivers for the increase. In terms of whether we're seeing progress, I think the biggest area of progress we're seeing is in our cooperation with the Indonesian government. We are about to roll out a series of public information campaigns in those ports, which will involve AFMA officers going into the community and working with community leaders and community participants on the implications of illegal fishing, both in terms of the consequences of being caught, but also issues like safety of life at sea and things like that. And that's an approach that was successful last time we experienced this upsurge in sort of 2005-06, and has been successful in other countries like Vietnam as well.
Okay, great. Well, on notice, if you could just provide me some further details on the nature of that campaign and specifically how it's going to be deployed, what materials are going to be used in the community, I'd be interested in that. That'd be great. And just on that, I mean, the officers you're deploying to these ports, are they new recruitments? Are they additional to existing AFMA complement, or is there just staff you already had on the books that are...
Yeah, thanks. No, these are largely staff from our Darwin office who have been doing the job for a long time. A lot of them are Bahasa speakers, which obviously helps with that kind of exercise. But as I said, they'll be side by side with Indonesian officials who are sort of taking their share of the responsibility.
Yeah, okay. And just in terms of that, so obviously we had a significant number in 21-22. Did AFMA respond by increasing the resources it deploys from within its overall resourcing to the dealing with IUU fishing, or did you sort of keep it the same?
So most of the resourcing in terms of detecting and deterring IUU fishing comes through Maritime Border Command, which is part of Department of Home Affairs, and they deploy Navy and Border Force assets. So from that perspective, there was no need for us to increase our resourcing. We did do a couple of things. We changed, so our role under previous circumstances, if an illegal vessel was apprehended and brought into Darwin or somewhere else, AFMA then takes over and caretakes and destroys the vessel, as well as prosecuting and repatriating the fishers. Because of COVID, those vessels, when they're intercepted, they're not being brought into land anymore. So we changed our posture to be able to assist with the destruction of vessels at sea where it's appropriate and safe to do so. Which was a sort of a change in stance. The public information campaigns that we're talking about, that is additional resources that I've diverted from other priorities.
Sure, okay, all right. Just in terms of some of the difficulties I know that have been experienced in the last couple of years, particularly with regard to COVID, working with state jurisdictions and the restrictions they had on officers, AFMA officers being able to get into a jurisdiction like WA and then off to do what they need to do to deal with these issues. Have they been resolved? I mean, did we ever sort of get to a place where we had a good arrangement with state jurisdictions?
It was very variable, Senator. So the issue was if our officers and Border Force officers, for that matter, had been at sea and interacting with foreign fishers, then depending on which state that boat came back into, there were different quarantine requirements. Or if we wanted to fly an officer from Canberra to Broome, for example, then in some cases they had to undertake quarantine. And so it really did reduce our flexibility. Those issues are all resolved, of course, mainly by virtue of the fact that there aren't border restrictions between the states anymore.
Okay, difficult at the time though. Just in terms of reports, and this may well be a question that sort of does go into Australian Border Force and Home Affairs, and if I need to ask it there, I will, but reports that are made by commercial fishers about illegal fishing activity, and illegal foreign fishing activity. Are the reports made to you, or do they go to Border Force? Or is there a mix? Is there a central hotline that people can dial into or radio into?
So we have a illegal fishing hotline that we encourage anybody to use, and then if it's a domestic matter, obviously we deal with it directly. If it's a foreign matter, then it gets referred through to Maritime Border Command.
Okay, and is Maritime Border Command a 24/7 operation?
Yes.
So if there are reports that people, for example, in the Pilbara report an Indonesian fishing vessel with allegedly 10 crew illegally fishing, dial it into Maritime Border Command and Border Command say, we're closed for the weekend, would that strike you as unusual?
I think ABF, the Border Force, may have dealt with this in Home Affairs because it's probably more a management issue for them, I think I'm right in saying. I don't mind Mr Norris telling you what he knows, but the responsibilities for it more sit with Border Force.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, it may well fall into that, so thanks, Minister. Mr Norris, is there any... Yeah.
I guess the only thing I could offer is Maritime Border Command is 24/7. Whether the ability to take phone calls from the public is 24/7 or not, I couldn't comment on.
And is there a fallback capability within AFMA if, for instance, such activity can't be reported to Maritime Border Command? Does AFMA have a role to fill in the gap there or not?
A response capability?
Yes. Yes, or information receipt capability.
So we have 24-hour duty officer that will take those phone calls and refer them on.
And do you have an arrangement with Maritime Border Command to fill in those gaps if they can't take the calls?
I'll have to take that on notice, Senator.
Sure.
We have officers located in Maritime Border Command, not 24/7, but they are there working on the watch floor with Border Force and other agencies.
Okay, no problems. Well, look, the final question, Minister, just in relation to a point made by Mr Norris before around relations with Indonesia, what discussions have you had with your counterpart in relation to IUU fishing, and where do you see things going from here, and what major steps do you think we're going to take in partnership with the Indonesians to combat this?
Yeah. You might recall, Senator Dunningham, I was in Indonesia a couple of months ago, principally to meet with them about the foot and mouth disease issues. I actually did have a meeting with the Indonesian Minister for Fisheries lined up as part of that visit, but unfortunately it had to be cancelled at their end due to something that arose. So I haven't had a direct dealing with the Minister over there about it. But I do know these are issues that have been pursued at both embassy level, departmental level. And I would have to check this, but it may have also been raised by Senator Ayres when he was at the G20 meeting in some of the bilateral discussions he had as well.
Sure.
He ended up representing me at the G20 because we had that rescheduled parliamentary sitting.
Of course.
So happy to come back to you with some information about what engagement there's been.
Okay, well, look, on notice, that would be great. What correspondence has been had with the Indonesian government from yourself, from the department, through AFMA, through perhaps if we can ask what Post has done as well. And was, when you arranged the meeting with your Indonesian counterpart, which was subsequently cancelled, it was clear the intent was to discuss IUU fishing?
That was certainly one of the issues that I intended to raise.
Sure.
There were a number of issues that we were going to discuss, but that was, and I don't know whether they were ever notified that was what I was going to raise or one of the things I was going to raise, but certainly that was my intention.
Okay, well, look, if you can provide, as I've asked, that information.
And the other thing I should say actually is that, and others may be able to elaborate on this, but my understanding is that the Indonesian government has a shared concern with us about managing illegal fishing. Some of their waters are exposed to illegal fishing from other countries as well. So I wouldn't want people to get the impression that it's all about us going in and scolding them about doing the wrong thing.
No.
Both our countries have issues around illegal fishing, and there's actually some room for cooperation on that front as well.
Very much the case right across the Pacific as well. As we know, there are other players who do the wrong thing, and all power to AFMA and those who support them in what they do. But no further questions from me. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, follow up? Yeah,
Just quickly, Chair, thank you. So how many illegal fishing boats have been intercepted, say, in the past 6 months or year? Do we have those figures?
Yeah, it's 46. 46.
46 over what time period is that?
This financial year.
This
So
financial year
last-
from July 1st?
Yep.
What, last financial year? How many were intercepted?
337.
337. And the year before that? You got that figure?
I don't have it on me. I'll have to take it on notice,
Okay, if you
Senator,
take on
but
notice.
it was less. So we've seen a ramp up
seen an
since
increase.
COVID started.
Since COVID started? Yeah. Okay.
I think I'm right in saying, and Mr Norris went into this before, there's some evidence to suggest that countries that had been reliant on tourism
Right.
income,
Have
with tourists drying up, people decided to explore other ways to make a living, I guess is what it comes down to.
Correct.
got the figures here.
And my apologies. Apparently, I do have the number. It's 85, Senator. the year before.
85, yeah, I've got it here. Can I just check, so 2021, 22, you said was 337?
Correct.
Okay, the figure, is this only part of year, is it? Well, anyway, okay, but definitely 337. Yep, okay, all right, thank you very much, thank you, Chair.
Senator Mackenzie, you have one question, you said?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, gentlemen.
I'll
And
come to you to wrap up, please.
Ms Wilcock. Just wanting to know what programs or research is being undertaken to build capacity across the industry, given our ageing fleet, particularly in the southeast, with respect to energy efficiency and production efficiency.
Yeah, thanks very much, Senator. Unfortunately, that probably would have been a question for FRDC.
RDC.
And I know Dr. Hone's very interested in it. From AFMA's perspective as the regulator, we're not involved in any work along those lines. Our role is to try and keep fish stocks in a state that will support an economically viable fishery that will create the right environment for that kind of investment.
Right. So the global standards around sustainable harvesting of fish stocks, you're only looking at the stock,
No, not quite,
not
Senator.
the harvest part.
We have, yes, sorry, the harvest part, yes.
Yes, well, that's my question. Going to the state of the fleet more generally is the other side of that equation to ensure that it's harvested sustainably, right?
Yeah, correct. So if we can create an ecosystem and fish stocks that are sustainable and maintained at high enough levels so that it's economically viable to harvest them, that creates the right environment for investment into new technologies and new capacity.
All right, I might put them on notice then too.
Sorry, to
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify, so thank you, Chair. Just want to clarify the figure for this financial year, I think 40, what was it?
It's 46 as of the report I got this morning.
Okay, I was just checking the date, so that's to today,
As of
effectively.
3 a.m. this morning, I think you said, didn't you?
Thank you.
Right, Senator Whish-Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Just could I ask if there's been any updates on the MOU signed with the Tasmanian Government around the trial of salmon expansion into Commonwealth waters in Bass Strait?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator. It's not an issue that we're directly involved in.
So now that the Tasmanian Government's got a trial, there hasn't been any meetings or any discussions, or you haven't been updated on any developments or progress?
Not that I'm aware of.
Would that be, was that part of the agreement that you'll be not informed during the process or during the trial process, which could go 2 or 3 years?
So Emma Campbell, First Assistant Secretary, Advent Chemicals Fish Forestry Engagement Division. So the department's leading the work on the trial rather than AFMA. Effectively, the aquaculture trial is in the hands of the Tasmanian Government and the Blue Economy CRC. Yeah. The next step in the process is for the Blue Economy CRC to develop a research plan and submit that to the Tasmanian Government, and for the Tasmanian Government to consult with the Commonwealth when they receive that plan.
Can you give any potential timing on that?
No, my understanding is that the Blue Economy CRC his timing has slowed somewhat, but we're meeting with them next week, so we'll keep informed with them. But
could you take that on notice, like when you expect that consultation will occur between we have
Certainly,
any,
yeah.
and if any timeframes have shifted in terms of the trial as well.
The trial's in place for 3 years, and we're
Correct.
really in the hands of the Blue Economy CRC, but we'll take any details we have on that on notice.
Great, okay, thank you. Could I just ask for an update on the structural adjustment package for the South East Trawl? Where are we at with that? Have consultations begun with stakeholders, and is a framework being set?
You'll need to take that as well. So again,
Okay,
the department's running the structural adjustment package. AFMA is making decisions on the fishery, so we're working together on that. In the budget a couple of weeks ago, the government confirmed the funding, which was good. It was part of the government looking at what's next. So we've been doing, in advance of that decision, a lot of pre-work, some consultation with the industry, but also the work that you'd expect about legal certainty and probity and tender documentation. So we're still close to being able to talk more formally, I guess, on our program parameters and test that with concession holders before going out. And we're still hoping to go out just after Christmas to call for, I guess, a reverse tender on concessions, and then to have that funding expended this financial year.
And are you confident that the full budgeted amount will be used?
I wouldn't put it that way. I think probably one of the success stories might be that we get it for cheaper and we don't spend the full budget amount. Okay. But we're confident that we'll run out the program.
So just to clarify though, I understand an AFMA commissioner has gone to Lakes Entrance and met with concession holders and stakeholders. Is that correct?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. I certainly have, and I'm a member of the Commission as well as the CEO. So in our process of designing the closures, which the buyback responds to, we ran 11 port visits throughout the fishery, 3 of which were in Lakes Entrance. And
is there an acceptance amongst fishing stakeholders that climate change has played a role? Do they understand? Do they understand climate change has played a role in this buyout?
Yeah, they certainly do, and they describe some of the trends that they've seen in the fishery, which match a sort of growing understanding of what is changing in the environment that we're trying to manage.
Okay. Is there any changes to the time frame? Like you said, December. When do you expect this to wrap up?
Again, we're expecting to have the licences bought out by the end of the financial year, so by June.
Okay. And have you made public the potential, that there's going to be some spatial management changes, some areas that are closed in the fishery to fishing or fishing effort? Has that been made public?
Certainly there's been a number of media reports about it, some initiated by the industry, some initiated by the local member of parliament, and we've participated in media interviews and things. So there's been no deliberate public release strategy on our part, but there's no secrecy either.
Will there be at some stage? Will you release the details, including the parts of the fishery that have been closed?
We can do, yeah. There's no.
And just as a matter of interest, Mr. Norris, are those areas that have been excluded? Is that for all fishing effort, or is it just for targeted species that might come with bycatch?
Thanks very much. So the fishery that we're dealing with is called the Commonwealth Trawl Sector, or sometimes called the South East Trawl Fishery. It has 2 main gear types that participate in it, otter trawl and Danish seine. So of the 5 areas that the Commission's agreed to close, all 5 are closed to otter trawling. Okay. 4 out of the 5 are closed to Danish seining.
4 out of the 5, okay. And what is your expectation on the closure, those areas of exclusion or closure? How in terms of time, how long do you think they'll be closed for?
So
is there a review process attached to this?
It's a great question, and it's something that industry's been really interested in working with us on. So the closures commence on the 1st of May next year, and we have started our discussions with industry on two fronts. One, what does a monitoring program look like? You know, we need to know what's going on so that we can assess whether these closures are achieving what we want them to. And two, under what circumstances might we be able to move, shift, relax the closures? So no, there are no hard and fast plans at the moment, but we've offered our assurance to industry that these are not intended to be a set and forget type management measure, that we're trying to achieve a specific objective and we'll keep sort of amending it to achieve that objective.
Okay. So on top of the buyouts of quota, you've got some other input controls like this kind of management approach. I'm just kind of trying to grapple with the 23 million to buy out that capacity. Will that capacity ever come back into the fishery? Do you see what I'm in terms of double accounting? Are the taxpayer going to buy it out, and then we're going to see the fishery, those quotas, are they gone permanently?
There are, of course, avenues in the fisheries legislation to issue new authorities. So just to clarify, the buyback will remove boat licences as opposed to quota.
Right. Okay.
So of course there are avenues to issue new ones. My opinion is that won't happen in the future. My opinion is that even under the most successful imagining, this is going to be a fishery that's smaller now than it is.
Okay.
A fishery smaller in the future than it is now.
And essentially based on environmental changes, especially climate change. Obviously, fisheries management goes hand in glove with that. Have we managed these fisheries enough for climate? I'll save my questions on that for the Senate inquiry that's looking at this, which is part of the convention here, not to necessarily go into questions on that. Could I ask in relation to, well, actually, just before sorry, please.
Sorry to interrupt you, Senator. Sorry, you asked about other input controls as well.
Yeah.
So in addition to the closures, there will be changes to the gear that Danish seine vessels can use.
Right.
And that was the trade-off for allowing access to that fifth quota. So that will likely involve, we're working through it at the moment, will likely involve larger mesh size, which allows small fish to escape. And so that's where we'll get the conservation gain to trade off from the access to the closure.
Now, I did raise this with the South East Trawl last week in Hobart when we had a hearing on fisheries quota management and about the criticisms that have been raised by, for example, environmental NGOs over the years about lack of observers and cameras on board, and they said they are working with AFMA on that. Could you give us progress, an update on what's happening in regards to, presumably to get better data for better management in the future?
In last year's budget, the government announced significant funding for AFMA to roll out electronic monitoring in a greater number of fisheries. And we are working with the South East Trawl industry, particularly through the Industry Association, to roll out a trial of EM technology as early next year. And that's part of the discussion about what does the future look like for the fishery, under what circumstances could vessels regain access to those closure areas. Because there are industry members that are adamant that they are able to fish in areas and not catch things that we're worried about. And electronic monitoring would be a great tool for being able to demonstrate that.
Which is generally considered a better, maybe not, I won't use the word efficient, but a better process. Would it be observers on board or cameras in terms of looking at bycatch as an example?
It really depends on what the information gap is that you're trying to fill. So cameras do some things that observers can't do, like staying awake for 24 hours at a time. But observers obviously can do things that cameras can't, like taking biological samples, moving their perspective and things like that. So neither is a panacea, and we need to work out how to leverage the strengths of both against the information that we need to collect.
So just as a matter of interest, in the areas that have been closed with existing stakeholders that have been operating there across the different, I mean, let's say targeting pursuing the target species of flathead, how many of them would already have or have had historically had cameras or observers on board?
So I'd have to take on notice an
could,
exact number,
yeah.
but the vast majority will have had observers over the course of their life.
Permanently, like always, observers always on board?
No. So the coverage rate that we generally seek to achieve again responds to what it is that we're trying to monitor. So.
But you would have been aware, Mr. Norris, for many years now, concerns around, jackass morwong and red bait and blue wahoo and other kind of perhaps lower value species that have been bycatch. You'd have been aware about concerns about these for some years.
Jackass morwong is a new one, and that's why it's triggered such a management response. But yes, certainly we've spoken before about a number of species, and some of the ones that you've named that were depleted back in the day and haven't responded despite us pulling the normal management levers that one would expect to see them respond and recover.
Thank you. I've just got some questions about the orange ruffy fishery. Is the latest stock assessment for the eastern zone orange ruffy been concluded? It was conducted in 2021, but I understand it's still not published. Is that correct? Or has it been published?
I think I'll have to take that on notice as to whether it's been through the Resource Assessment Group and Management Advisory Committee.
Could you take on notice whether the biomass of orange ruffy was substantially downgraded? Are you aware of that? Is that correct? In particular, in relation to a revision on one important fishery parameter, the natural mortality.
Yes,
right.
Yeah, correct. So the previous stock assessment tried to examine the sensitivity of a couple of different parameters, natural mortality being one of them. Yes, it did result in a different understanding of the size of the stock and the vulnerability of the stock.
So obviously the reason I'm asking these questions is, and I will put some more detailed stuff to you on notice, but obviously it's been trumpeted as a big fishery success story that especially with quota management. But yeah, I'm just concerned with some of the stuff I'm hearing. For example, the TAC, has it been downgraded from 1,277 tonnes in 2021-22 to 633 tonnes in 22-23? Was that the recommendation of that assessment? That you needed a very substantial, nearly a halving, over 50% downgrade of the TAC based on this latest report?
That was the recommendation in the stock assessment if you apply the harvest strategy completely as written.
Did you do that?
What the Resource Assessment Group and the Management Advisory Committee did was ask the researchers to go back and explore various alternative scenarios, including a step-down approach from current to lower. And so with a stock assessment as sophisticated as this one, it allows you to assess the risks of different management strategies over the long term, and assesses those risks against, the risk of the biomass falling below our limit reference point, the risk of biomass declining, and so on. The step-down approach that the AFMA Commission agreed to was obviously higher than the initial recommendation, but remained very well within risk parameters.
So that's 1,074 tonnes is where you landed?
I think from memory the risk was 0.4% of falling below the limit reference point.
So was it around 1,074 tonnes is where you landed?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned you told researchers to go away and look at a step-down approach. What researchers are you talking about there?
This is the CSIRO stock assessment team.
Okay.
So the ones that prepared the initial assessment.
And did that process where you asked the researchers to go away and look at a sort of step-down approach, has this come from industry consultation or pressure on you to not set the TAC at the harvest rate?
I wouldn't say pressure, Senator. On those resource assessment groups and management advisory committees, there are industry representatives, and yes, that's where this proposal came from. But certainly, any decisions are owned by the relevant committee rather than individual members of it.
So would you consider, in terms of how you manage the stock going forward, would you give consideration to fishery impacts that have occurred, over recent decades, in regards to the predicted status of the stock going forward?
Yeah.
Are you managing it for long term, I suppose, is what I'm asking, or are you sort of saying we can fit in a bit more quota, perhaps till 2030 we might be able to ramp up numbers a bit more in the short term, without giving a lot of consideration to the long term of the fishery?
So certainly, as I say, those management strategy evaluation projections that can be done on a stock assessment like this can be done over a number of timeframes. I think the longest one from memory was 2050.
Yeah, look, I understand you're under pressure. You've got your scientific advice, but you've got some industry preferences, perhaps we should say, and you've got to try and manage them. But and perhaps I'll get more into this in the Senate inquiry. I'm just interested in how you balance those ecological risks with pressure from industry to up fishing quotas to keep fishers in business. And especially given in the light of what we've seen in some fisheries, including the southeast trawl, where things have got pretty dire because we haven't been precautionary enough.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as a balance between our ecological objectives and pressure from industry. I'd describe it as a balance between our ecological objectives and our economic objective. So in our legislation, we have an objective to maximise net economic returns from the use of Australian fisheries. And so that was what drove the Commission's decision, consideration and then decision on the alternative, the step-down approach. It was, what is the additional ecological risk of this strategy compared to the economic cost of this strategy?
Okay. Look, it's a fairly long question, and I'll put the details to you on notice, but I understand in 2018, CSIRO conducted one of the world's most comprehensive kind of field studies of fishing impacts on deep sea seamount associated coral reefs, and they might have used the Investigator for some of that work. And it kind of, including many of the seamounts historically impacted by the Australian orange roughy fishing fleet. Was that extensive and I understand very expensive taxpayer funded research incorporated in the latest ecological risk assessment? And will you use that to guide your future setting of catch?
I will have to take that on
And
notice.
I'll put that.
I would be very surprised.
There's a bit of a
if it
mouthful
wasn't.
there, so I'll put that in more detail. But you'll be surprised if that wasn't used. Just a few questions quickly on Marine Park, and then I'll finish, Chair. Like I'll only got I think two more left. Is it correct that the study implications of current spatial management measures for AFMA, ERAs for habitats, and there was FRDC project number 2014-204, which is largely used to inform AFMA's ERAs for habitats, it's based on Commonwealth Marine Parks as planned in 2012, not those subsequently suspended or weakened, which we saw over process 2013, 2014, 2015, especially downgrading the green zones. In terms of the areas protected from trawling, have any of those been implemented in 2018? Were any of those recommendations from FRDC incorporated into your management?
I'm not familiar with the recommendations that you're referring to, Senator. I'll have to just take.
Okay, I'll put those on notice too as well. And I know that just at some stage later this year, and the Minister might know the exact date, the South East Bioregional Network is going to be reviewed. It's up for its 10-year review. Will you be providing feedback to the Environment Department? Have they asked you to provide any feedback in relation to that review process?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, we have had some discussions with Parks Australia on what that review might look like. We typically provide catch and effort information to parks while they're going through those kind of processes, and I would anticipate that will be our role again.
Yes.
We also participate in sort of industry consultation on an as needs basis.
Yeah, because my understanding is there's a number of fisheries shallower than 700 metres depth along the East Australian coast where habitats have been found to be at higher severe risk from the impacts of fisheries, especially trawling, in both 2007 and 2021. So I'd be interested in whether you're having any discussions with that process around spatial closures and any tweaking to marine park areas.
Yeah, so as I say, we have had some preliminary discussions. We'll continue to engage. It is a very difficult situation given the size of the closures that we have just put in as fisheries management closures.
In the southeast trawl?
Yes, a very large...
Can we put them down as marine parks, Mr Norris, or that might be a bit incendiary?
Well, as I say, our hope is that our intention is that these are put in place for a fisheries management objective, and when they've achieved that, then they won't be required, or at least in their current form.
There was a very open debate in this place as to whether marine parks could be classified as fisheries management tools. There was very different views on that, but yeah. Right, well, thank you for that. I'll put more detailed questions on notice.
Thanks, Mr Norris.
Thank you,
Thanks
Chair.
to your crew. You can now depart. Travel safely, and we'll call Dairy Australia. And Senators, we have the morning 15-minute break scheduled for 10:45.
Hey guys, nice, good to see you.
Welcome, Mr Mann.
Thank you. Good to be back again in person.
Good to have you back. Have you got an opening statement you wish to make?
Very brief one, Senator. My name's James Mann. I'm Chair of Dairy Australia and a dairy farmer in the far south of South Australia. My colleagues joining here today with me are Dr David Nation, Managing Director, and Mr Charles McAloon, General Manager of Trade and Strategy. We come to you today during a time when many dairy farmers are still dealing with the impacts of flooding. While this latest event has centred in northern Victoria and the Murray Dairy region, we also have current flooding in central west New South Wales and Wagga, and have flood recovery now underway in some parts of Tasmania and generally on the east coast of New South Wales. And we table the report on the flood impacts of the Murray Dairy region for you. Beyond the direct impacts of floods, the ongoing rain and wet conditions along most of the eastern seaboard has made it very challenging spring for many farms, with very late start to cutting silage and hay if we're going to get it at all. Unfortunately, the latest event has overshadowed what has been a more positive profitability environment for many Australian dairy farmers. The recently released Victorian Dairy Farm Monitor report for 21-22 shows the average profits for the 80 participant farm businesses to be 45% above the long-term average. This represents the highest financial returns since the project, the fourth highest financial returns since the project began 16 years ago, seeing many farmers reinvest back in their businesses. Happy to discuss these results and any other issues with committee members today. Senator, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mann. It's just a shame things are looking up and then this happens. But anyway, Senator McKenzie.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, one and all. Firstly, your annual report is due to be tabled in the Senate at the 31st of October. I don't have a copy of it here.
We're not a statutory authority, Senator, so we table our report as soon as we publish and put it out with a notice of meeting, and we have provided it to the department. It will be tabled shortly.
Right. Sorry, I was advised that you were due to get that in by the 31st, but it's with the department at the moment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we might just check that, Senator McKenzie. I thought that all of the RDC annual reports had been tabled, but we might just double check that.
So the guideline is, the requirement is all Commonwealth entities, not statutory authorities only.
Let's just double check that.
It should all be in the legislation that you're governed by. But thank you, Jerry. But that's with the department. So, Mr. Metcalfe, have you received it?
I'm just checking on that now, Senator.
All right, I'd love to know.
I do recall a year or two ago there was some discussion with the committee about tabling requirements, and particularly for the industry-owned RDCs, and we sought to clarify that. So I'll just double check as to
we've got a lot
what
of
the
them.
situation is. So.
AWI and Dairy Australia don't know if you want to be in the AWI camp, but anyway, it's great. It's with the department, so we'll find out where to go from there. Now, we mentioned the flooding. In your predictions in your industry forecast publication, you predict that we'll see a $0.5 billion litre fall in milk production this year, correct?
That was correct when we made the predictions. The flooding is probably overshadowed that to some extent, Senator.
Well, yeah, good, because you're leaping ahead to my questions. So I'd like to get some commentary around, obviously, the energy inputs for dairy are quite high, and given the Albanese budget makes it clear that energy prices are going to increase by 50%. I want to know what impact that's going to have on your farmers, your levy payers. We've got grain and fodder going through the roof thanks to the floods. So I just want to understand what thinking you've done around, obviously, the prediction you made. People are making business decisions as a consequence. What work are you doing to update those predictions, given both the budget and the floods? How quickly will they get out to levy payers? And what mitigation strategies are in place to obviously assist with milk production, because that's quite a devastating figure.
Thank you, Senator. I might take that in a couple of ways. Could I answer it personally from how I'd see it as a farmer, and then I'll hand over to David about how he sees how the business will run it.
Where do you farm, Mr. Mann?
I farm as far south in South Australia as you can get without touching the ocean.
It's good country down there.
Second house on the left over the border from Nelson.
Okay.
So from a farmer's point of view, a slow harvest and a non-spring harvest and a harvest of poor quality fodder will influence milk production for a long period of time. Equally, a harvest of poor quality grain will also influence production from a long period of time. And as a farmer, that's bad news. From the individual farms, particularly those who are inundated, it will definitely be a massive impact on their businesses.
Yep.
How our business as Dairy Australia is responding, I'll hand over to David.
Thank you.
Who's
handing to Charles?
Yeah. Thanks, Senator. So we're currently going through the process of updating our milk production forecasting, obviously taking into account the impact of the current floods, but it should be said that the actual milk losses as a result of the floods have actually been relatively minimal because of all of the collaboration that's taken place across the industry. The longer term impacts are more about fodder and the fodder supplies and the direct impact of the wet across vast areas of the country that we're just unpacking at the current time. You do talk about the increasing energy costs and inputs. We've just recently released or developed a new purchased input price index, which basically highlights all the input costs for dairy producers, which really brings that to life, and that does highlight some really significant increases, particularly across the energy space. But but also
Such
other.
as? Go to the detail, please.
Oh, no, so,
Because
you
I
know,
can read the report.
So obviously for fuel, 40%, fertiliser, 77%, this is in the last 12 months. Protein concentrates up about 10%. But across the board, we're seeing
Electricity?
we don't have a live, we've got about 40% of the costs incorporated into that month-to-month increase, but all those factors will be taken into account in that longer-term forecast.
And so when, so this new index you've created, so is energy costs a part of that index or not?
Well, obviously energy relates to the fertiliser prices and the fuel prices.
No,
we don't have
but
the actual electricity.
on farm, if you're having to keep your product chilled, I mean, one of the great challenges for the dairy industry has always been the perishability of this particular product. So for the individual levy payer, their energy price at any given time can have a significant impact on their input costs, yes or not?
Absolutely, directly and indirectly. And as I've said, with the prices that we have access to on a month-to-month basis, that's really highlighting through some of those costs of fertiliser and fuel. But that's not to say there's not the on-farm electricity costs, as you say, which are
so that's not so the on-farm electricity cost isn't part of this new index?
It's not just because we don't have a running tally of to incorporate within the index on a month-to-month basis.
No, I get it might be, actuarially hard to work it out. Particularly given farmers are accessing different contracts, etc. But its lack of inclusion in this index, is that because Dairy Australia doesn't see energy costs as a significant input?
No, labour is also not incorporated into it, but labour is a significant cost. But it's because of the ongoing nature and the variability.
So what's going to be the actual kind of reality impact of this index? You've spent a lot of time developing. If it doesn't include two of probably the top four input costs on farm.
I think even despite that, it shows a pretty stark story about the increasing costs that farmers are wearing through their businesses.
Okay, on notice, because I know on notice, because we'll go round and round the roundabout on that one. Could you, on notice, have a look at both labour and electricity, because I think farmers would be very concerned that their RDC isn't in formulating their predictions, etc., isn't taking those two things into account.
And Senator, I just absolutely, but also, and David mentioned about Dairy Farm Monitor results. We do those every year, and that includes the full suite of costs and gives us an overarching view of how of the profit drivers of individual farm businesses across the country. That includes every single one of the costs and gives us a very good perspective about where they sit in the broader landscape. This cost index is really about just having a running tally of some of the overarching or easily accessible cost items that we can tap into on a month-to-month basis.
Because, I mean, in modern farming, data is power now, and real-time access to that data helps really good business decisions to be made on farms. So all power to that increasing. Thank you. Flood recovery. Used to have to think about this a lot. The LGA, local government areas, particularly in New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania, who have been affected by flooding, can you let me know which ones have access to Category C and D assistance, such as flood, and Minister, actually, you might be able to tell me, I forgot that. We have fodder, restocking grants, not just the fencing, etc. I'm very concerned in my home state that a lot of talk has been about we've got to get in to do the assessments before we can ask Murray for some money, the Minister for some money. Well, that's actually not the case. You don't need to have assessed every single farm or house. And it really, I think, leads to a heightened anxiety for those flood-affected communities when they don't know that help is on its way in the form of very, very real assistance from jointly funded Commonwealth state grants. Do you have oversight of which LGAs have been able to access what level of assistance?
We don't have it to hand, but we would be able to tap into that, Senator.
It's probably better for me to take that question, Senator, given it's probably more an emergency management issue.
It is.
Why don't I come back to you with all of the LGAs? There are literally dozens of LGAs that we have activated for different forms of assistance, including primary producers across those 3 states. So I'm happy to get you a list. What I am aware of is that in response to what I guess has become known as the September-October floods, different, and you'll remember this from your time as the Minister, we tend to respond to requests from the individual states as to the type of support they
Yes, it's nice
seek.
that you now realise that, Minister.
And we have done an incredible job of getting money out the door more quickly than any government before and responding to those requests.
I would argue that that's reliant on the state delivery agencies, as you know.
Well,
and some states, your home state is very good at getting money out the door. My home state, not so good.
I didn't realise we'd gone into emergency management estimates. I thought we did that a couple of weeks ago, but but being the helpful kind of guy I am, Senator, I think I'm right in saying that the Tasmanian government asked for and received a request for primary producer grants up to $25,000, which is 50-50, obviously, state and federal.
Yep.
New South Wales at this point has asked for and received the same, up to 25. Victoria asked for and received up to 75.
So does that include restocking, replanting?
Well, that's the the general. I'm pretty sure it's
clean-up component.
Yeah. I'm happy to get each of the states is slightly
if you
different.
could give me that detail,
Yeah,
I'd
each of
really
the states is slightly
appreciate it.
different, but I'll get you the detail of what's been approved and which LGAs that covers.
And Dairy Australia, I'd like to get from you the same, and just ease of access in applying and receiving that support. Thank you. I just finally want to go to the dairy poll. Everyone's nodding and smiling. Okay. Conducted between the 24th of February and the 31st of March. 4 choices, no change, 15% increase, 20% increase, 25% increase. Outcome of the poll was no change to the levy, receiving 64% of the votes. What was the cost of conducting the dairy poll this year?
Thank you, Senator. The cost of it, I will have to ask David for if we have it with us. I'm not certain.
Oh, he should have it.
We'll come back to you with that.
If you can just hold on that, we'll have that to
Thank you.
shortly.
Someone get on the text. How did that differ from the cost of the previous dairy poll, which you can't answer because you don't have the cost
I
of the
can
previous?
answer that one because I wandered around this country on the previous one in 2010, so it would be significantly
I remember
less.
that one, going to a meeting in
And it was
Sale.
the same. So I would imagine less, Senator.
Less? All right, I'd like a quantum on that.
Yep.
We'll get the quantum to you, Senator.
I mean,
we want to
believe-
get the correct number
I
to
can't
you.
believe, given this poll, that you wouldn't expect questions about dairy poll at Senate estimates.
Except that's why we're getting the number straight. I want to give you the correct answer,
Thank
Senator.
you.
I can also definitively say we spent less on the levy poll this time around than 10
No,
years ago.
that's fine.
2-minute warning.
How did the participation rate compare with the previous dairy poll?
I
you
can only...
come back to me, still, Chair.
Beg your pardon, sorry.
You would
beg your
like,
pardon?
if you want to come back to me, I'll just wait.
If I want, well, thank you so much, and I've made it very clear by 10:45 we will be taking a break, not for the benefit of the senators, but the good folk behind me. So at 10:45 we will stop, and if you're in continuation, Senator Mackenzie, well, whoop-de-doo.
Oh, Chair, so
Okay,
polite.
so is there a question
I have an answer
there?
for the current poll.
Yes.
I thought the questions would be on the current poll. The 44% of eligible votes were cast this time round. And I would have to take on notice, it's 10 years since the previous poll, the turnout from the previous poll. So, we saw that as a very strong turnout relative to other voluntary polls.
How does that compare with other RDCs requesting levy changes?
My understanding is that a typical voter participation is anywhere between 20% and 50%. So having a voter participation in mid-40s was a strong result.
Thank you.
Chair, I can quickly update Senator Mackenzie about the annual report.
Thank you.
The department received the DA annual report on Friday last week. It's available on their website, so if you look, it's there right now, Senator. The Minister is required to table the report within 14 sitting days of receiving it, and we're on track for that, and I'm told that that's provided for in the Dairy Produce Act 1986 that says it must be tabled within 14 sitting days. But I do recall that there was some discussion in this committee a year or two ago about the timing requirements, particularly for the industry RDCs, and if I can provide any further information about that so we're all clear, I'll do that after the break.
Sure, thank you.
Chair, can I just very, very quickly, can I just flag, I will have to finish up at 1 when we're scheduled to go to the lunch break because I've got to be in a different estimates committee straight after the lunch break.
It's a hard mark.
Oh, okay, cool.
It's a hard mark.
Okay, great, no problem.
You will be finished at 1, I can guarantee you that, Minister.
I thought I could rely on you.
Thanks, Mr Metcalfe. All right, let's suspend and reconvene at 11 o'clock. Take up our position, starting gates, Hansard Broadcasting, thank you very much. In continuation with Dairy Australia, Senator Mackenzie.
Senator, I have the answer for you on the cost of the levy poll, $450,000, Senator. That includes the cost of an independent advisory committee, plus communication to farmers, and the execution of the poll. And that is...
Hang on, sorry, David, I'm writing all this down. I'm old school. Independent Advisory Committee.
So there's a levy poll advisory committee.
Yes.
That's the cost of the operating
And
that
comms.
committee, and communication and regional events to inform farmers about the levy poll. And that's significantly less than last time there was a levy poll about 10 years ago, which was reported as over $700,000.
And that was restructuring as well, wasn't it, Dan?
Well,
there was a few things going on.
The last time there was a levy poll itself was 2011, when it was a straightforward levy poll.
Oh, yes.
And then between 2011 and now, there was also a vote by farmers to change the levy poll system. And then there was also the first levy poll advisory committee who recommended not to hold a poll in 2016.
Probably for the best. Okay, thank you. And the participation rate, no update on that between this one and the last?
I'd have to...
if on notice you could, as a percentage, that'd be great.
The difference?
So that advisory committee, who were the members?
So the way it was constituted, Senator, was the chair of DO, myself, and the chair of ADF at the time, Terry Richardson, selected an independent chair.
So the processes and...
No, not the processes.
Sorry, I'm a bit hard of hearing.
The chair.
And you're a very gently spoken man.
The chair of ADF.
Yep.
So Australian Dairy Farmers.
Yep.
And the chair of DA.
DA, sorry. Yep, got it.
So we selected an independent chair.
And who was that?
Ron Story.
Yep. So
we each put 2 members of our board onto that selection.
And how were those selected?
The 2 members from each of our board.
Yep.
By most appropriate people to do it and who had the time to do it. Sorry.
Well, how was the appropriateness of the people determined?
So, from our point of view, DO's point of view, we selected 1 farmer and 1 non-farmer.
And how did you select them?
Was
it open on the website? Was it
no, it was just
board members only?
I'm
wanting to understand the process.
Okay. So, from our board, it was a board decision, my decision as chair.
A board decision or your decision? You brought recommendations
I brought a
to the board?
recommendation to the board and asked who, because it was clearly a time commitment as well, who was
Yep.
able to commit the time required.
How did you determine your recommended candidates?
So on the whole committee,
No, your two that you took to the
two,
board.
how did I do it?
How did you do it?
I wanted a farmer to
Yeah.
clearly understand how levy payers and connected,
Yeah.
and I wanted an independent to bring a different way of
Yeah.
thinking to that
Skill set?
to that process.
No, I understand I completely understand what you wanted and why you wanted it, and I want to know how you picked your farmer and how you picked your independent, how
Okay.
you did.
Yeah, I made a judgment call on who was available, who wanted to do it, and who could do it.
So there was no open, transparent process?
Was it a trade secret, as discussed in the board
No,
level?
no. My question is, there was actually no process, was there? You just picked who you
As
felt
a
like.
There was no formal process, there was a discussion around the board table.
Right. How did ADF select theirs?
I have no idea, Senator.
But this is your advisory committee. Did they do the same thing, just pick someone?
So, sorry, Senator, just to be clear, this is not a Dairy Australia Advisory Committee. This is,
It's
there's a levy poll
I
instrument.
understand which it is, but I'm assuming the two stakeholders would understand how the committee was selected. So
Yes,
DA
yes,
is
of course.
understanding how they've selected theirs. They've picked two people, and the board has endorsed the chair's recommendation. Am I accurately describing that?
Yep.
Yep. Then ADF, you don't know the process they went through to get their two members?
No, Senator.
No.
I don't.
Okay. All right. So there was no okay.
So the public piece then came for the other 11? Is it 11? Either 11 or 13 farmers that sat on that levy poll advisory committee.
So hang on, we've got the chair of ADF, the chair of DA, an independent member that you've both agreed on. You've both kicked up another two, so that takes us to 7.
No.
So the levy poll instrument describes who does what to form the committee. So James described the process of finding an independent chair.
Yep.
And there was a recruitment process around that, and the criteria was that the chair had to be someone from outside the dairy industry.
Yep.
So Ron Story being someone
Yep.
with a grains industry background.
Absolutely.
The instrument said that 2 representatives from Dairy Australia are to be on the advisory committee. As James described, there was a significant discussion at the board for the reasons James described, and then by consensus, 2 representatives from the board to be nominated to the committee.
Yep.
We were then told there's 2 representatives from Australian Dairy Farmers, the Peak Farming Group.
Yep.
And it was their choice who they placed as representatives,
their
and
process
they
too.
informed us who
Yep.
they were. And then the levy poll instrument also talks about there is 1 representative from ADPF, the
Yep.
Peak Processor Group.
Yep.
There was discussions in that area around who should that be, because this is about a farmer levy.
Yeah.
And so ADPF were trying to decide who was the most appropriate representative rather than someone from their executive. They were interested in someone who was also a farmer and a processor, because then they would be able to relate to farmers paying a levy.
Yeah.
So they chose a farmer from Northern Victoria who runs a successful processing business.
Yep.
That formed a core group of a committee whose job was then to have an open call for farmers to participate in filling the remaining positions of the Levy Poll Advisory Committee.
Ah, right.
It was formed in 3 stages: a
Yep.
chair, then representatives under the instrument that had to be nominated,
Yep.
and then an open call for
And then a
farmers
general-
to make up the composition of the
For a total, and so that was a public process, the
public
final
advertised process of which that group had the responsibility to recruit farmers.
And so that was a
interview
public
farmers.
process?
Public process, open process.
And how many members in total?
The instrument allows for up to 15. I can't remember whether they filled 14 or 15 of those places,
Okay.
Senator.
All right, so
I think it was 15.
my understanding is there was quite a difference of opinion between the Levy Poll Advisory Committee members, and understanding the makeup, I can appreciate that there would be. What are the learnings from this process regarding managing those different opinions going forward?
I'm happy to continue. I really think it is for that committee to describe its learnings. I think one of the powers of that process is to have diversity on the committee. One of the challenges is to take the committee through an entire process from scratch, because that committee's role was to learn and understand more about the role of the levy, the success of Dairy Australia, the future aspirations of farmers, and where the role of the levy and the role of Dairy Australia as a service organisation fits. So that there was a group of people that came together with quite diverse perspectives from all over the country. We received reports from time to time about how the committee was going. My understanding is the committee worked very effectively to understand their role, understand the first question the levy committee has to ask themselves is it appropriate to hold a poll? Because their first decision they can make, which is the decision the previous committee made, was now is not the time to hold a poll. There is no grounds for changing the levy. So that is one of the first decisions they have to make.
So LPAC made a decision to increase the levy.
LPAC first of all made a decision that it was appropriate to hold a poll.
Yep.
And that is on the premise that there is a case for the levy not staying the same. They then have the opportunity to say, well, what should the levy be?
Yep.
They then, as a group, as a committee, made a decision that a 20% increase in the levy would be recommended to farmers.
Yep.
And then they set a ballot paper around those options, starting with no change up with a range around that 20%
and we
that they
canvassed
recommended.
that earlier. And my understanding was that was in part to account for the impacts of cost inflation on the value for the research dollars raised. Is that right? Was that part of the rationale for recommending that increase?
I know that's been quoted, but I don't think that's part of that form. That was
So
never
the
part
quote
of
was
their formal
incorrect?
report. Sorry?
Was the quote incorrect?
The quote, I don't believe, came from the Levy Poll Advisory Committee. I think that quote might have come from farmer representatives.
Okay, so is the quote was part of the rationale of increasing the levy because the cost of doing the inflationary pressures on doing research had increased? Yes or no?
Yeah, I mean, that's a true statement, but the justification for increasing the levy was not built around CPI or inflation.
What was it built around?
It was built around the case for the importance to the industry of being able to invest more in climate, being able to invest more in labour, being able to invest more in translation of research and regional services, and being able to invest more in some policy research and development. So to invest in doing
more things, not dealing with the inflationary pressure of doing the reality that every other business is dealing with.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a clear understanding that the cost of money had changed considerably for undertaking research and all the services that we do over the 10 years since the levy changed. And there was conversation amongst industry that is reason alone to vote for an increase. But the official dialogue from the Levy Poll Advisory Committee was around investing to advance the industry rather than investing to keep up with inflation.
Can you please explain the extent of the inflationary impacts on research capacity and other major factors impacting the sustainability of levy revenue?
Yes, in our preparatory documents for that levy committee, we showed quite clearly that the cost of doing business had increased since the last levy of the order of 22-23%. And if we projected forwards, not knowing what CPI has just done now, with projections made in that year, the year prior, when inflation was running more at 2 to 3%, we expected the cost, because these levy polls a run typically every 5 years, so we were also projecting forward what the cost of doing business was in the next 5 years as well, Senator. We expected the cost of performing our services to go up by the order of 28%. Now, clearly, CPI has gone higher than that now, so I think that's an outdated number.
Sorry, I do have to interrupt. We have the media in the room. Hold your fire, Tiger. Do you have a problem being photographed, any of you at the front bench? And if you do, we'll just tell the media no go. But if they've got your good side and you're quite happy, just let us know.
You look great.
I don't think I have a good side, Senator, but yes, that's fine.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr Nation. Gentlemen, you're all good? Okay, media, click away. Mr Nation, you were halfway through answering, sorry.
I think I've finished answering that question. Thank you, Senator, about the
Yeah,
the
so
cost of
you
business.
made some comments about ensuring the industry more broadly is sustainable going forward. So what are the key economic cost challenges for the dairy industry as a whole, both processors and farmers?
I can start with that. So if I bring it back to home on my farm, my number one cost will be homegrown feed. My number two cost will be bought-in feed.
Sorry, what was number two?
Number two would be purchased feed, so grain, canola meal, lupins, whatever. My number three cost would be labour, people. My number four cost is probably power, but power and diesel jointly. They'd be, and that.
Yeah, so the dairy industry includes processors and primary producers.
Yep.
So can I please have, I understand that's your own cost pressures, Mr Mann. What I'd appreciate the key economic cost challenges for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, so Senator, we don't have the same kind of cost breakdown through the processing sector as we do on farm, but we know that energy, proportionally for the industry, is a much more significant cost for the processing sector than it is for on farm. But we know that costs across the board have gone up through the whole supply chain. Cost of transport, cost of labour, energy, diesel, you name it. I mean, it's been significant. But energy proportionally for the processing sector is a significant cost pressure.
So maybe on notice, can I ask that at a farm and a processing level, because we're talking about the industry as a whole, you've gone to primary producers to ask for a 20%, not DA, but the Independent Advisory Committee has. You've gone to ask for an increase in the levy by 20% due to your own cost increases. I'd appreciate understanding the levy payers themselves, both the processors and the primary producers, what the cost impact for them has been over the same time period. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I think in Senator Sterle's absence, I'll just check to see if there's any other questions for Dairy Australia. Sorry, Senator Whish-Wilson, you have the call.
Could you ask Dairy Australia to just broadly reflect their sentiment on the methane pledge, the government's methane pledge, and whether you've been, talking to your members about this, and is there support in the industry for that pledge, and how that's going to be met?
Maybe, Senator, just for clarification, the Dairy Australia is a member-owned company with farmers as members.
Yeah.
Our role is to deliver services and perform R&D.
Yeah.
And the peak representative group, Australian Dairy Farmers, has the elected leadership of the industry and is the appropriate party to ask about their support for that pledge. Yep. We do note that they did put out a media release to represent their views.
Yep.
From a Dairy Australia perspective, our focus is on, and has been for some time, is on what R&D can be successful that reduces the carbon footprint of dairy farming. Okay. So our focus is on technical means to do this.
Yeah. So obviously the two will combine in the future as to how we meet that meet that pledge and what action is taken. So perhaps we had some discussions yesterday with the department around supplements. Could you just give us an update? I understand there's various supplements that dairy farmers and yourselves have been looking at. Could you just give us a brief update on that?
Yes, our understanding is there's now 4 to 5 different feed additives that are being trialled in different ways for the dairy industry. Our understanding is that at least 3 of them are now commercially available.
Okay.
And so farmers can choose to use them.
Are you doing work in terms of providing services? You're doing workshop and training and advocacy around this as well?
We are definitely informing people about what their carbon footprint is, and we're informing people about the ways that they can make a difference.
Yeah.
We're not giving specific commercial advice about one product versus another.
I can see why that would be difficult, problematic.
Yes, and I still think there's more work in particular to build out the way feed additives can be fed to animals, particularly in a pasture-based system that delivers a greater reduction in methane. Things like slow-release technology are going to be particularly important to pasture-based agriculture.
Yeah.
But
is anyone doing slow release at the moment?
There are a number of people working on it globally.
Right.
And I note, not for us, but I note that grants from the science department have specifically given out grants around slow release technology for extensive agriculture.
There was if you're interested, Senator Wishlawson, the day we announced that we would be signing the methane pledge, Minister Bowen and I put out a joint press release listing probably around about a dozen different organisations that are going to be receiving grants.
Yeah. So I'm just interested in the, I suppose, there's 3 products that are commercially available, you say, others that still need more trialling. What's the uptake been amongst your members? Have you had any feedback? I understand there's probably no immediate productivity gain from using these kind of products, and they're a cost to farmers. So what's the uptake been amongst your members for these kind of products?
I don't think we'd have the actual empirical evidence number to know what that is, Senator. However, we'll take one of them. It's called Milo, made by Terrigen.
Yeah.
We use it at home. It does have a productivity benefit, we think. It's certainly really useful on young calves. Its benefit in cows is hard to pick up, but we must feel okay about it because we continue to use it. And it's just... So we were using it before we were aware that it had a methane
okay, so it has other benefits apart from methane
benefits,
reduction.
Yeah. Yep.
Do the other products on the markets have other benefits as well?
One does, at least one other does claim it does.
Okay.
But they, just for clarification, at the moment those products in the market tend to have smaller impacts on methane.
That's correct.
And a mixed benefit with productivity in methane.
Yeah.
Some of the lead candidates, and we hear seaweed, for example, spoken about a lot.
Yeah.
Their claims are for much more significant reductions in methane, but the corollary to that is they're not necessarily making any claims about productivity improvements, so that they're positioning themselves as more specifically for methane reduction. So I think what we'll end up with is a suite of feed additives that differ between their impact on methane and differ on their impact on productivity, and farmers will have to make a commercial decision, their own farming decision about purchasing and feeding one or more of those to get a group effect of those additives.
Yeah, and I suppose in terms of market signals, incentivising farmers, how do we go down this path of if it's a cost to farmers, and it would be, and they weren't necessarily getting a productivity benefit, how do we incentivise them to use, assuming these products are trialled and they have demonstrated benefits for methane reduction, both in feedlots and, as you say, slow release perhaps out in the paddock. How do we go about getting them to use them? I mean, obviously, will your organisation play a role in, if I could use the word advocacy, in the use of these products? I mean, or is it going to require government to step in and subsidise them, or go the New Zealand route, provide a stick approach with a price on carbon and emissions?
Well, I've made clear that's not going to happen.
Well, indeed you have, but I'm just wondering how it will happen in the absence of that. Do you see do you think... Okay, perhaps...
maybe just to help with that, I think this is the next space for active debate.
Yeah.
And where you have a benefit on methane but no productivity or economic advantage on farm, there is the potential of very low take-up by farmers on a voluntary basis.
Which is what I'm concerned about. Yeah.
But there's also an opportunity for potentially substantial take-up if the supply chain recognises what farmers are doing and puts labels on products and makes appropriate claims.
So,
So
are
we'll
you
need to have higher milk
going to
prices.
put up the price of milk?
I think
That's what you said, Senator Watt. You
No,
have to
that's
have higher
actually-
milk prices.
It's the only way.
No, he's talking about
That's what
labelling,
you
actually.
said. That's not
Well,
what.
how are
He
you
said
gonna-
it's bureaucratese, I'll give you that, but for the average
No, no.
Australian, what
Don't
they
put-
just heard
don't put
is the
words-
methane
Order,
pledge is going to
Senator
lead to
Kennedy.
higher milk
So-
prices.
You can-
That was
I'm
what
used
was
to you
clearly
putting words
said.
in my mouth. Don't do it to something.
Thank you, Senator Wilson.
All right.
No, actually,
Just order.
Senator
Just
Kennedy,
hang.
you're putting words in the mouth of the witness.
Well,
I think
I'm
it's
going
very
to help.
Very unparliamentary.
Senators, I'm going to help out here. All right. Senator Whish-Wilson has the call, and I did say the other day, you know, if you don't like the answer, I can't help that. But can you let people answer the question before people start jumping all over each other? So, Senator Whish-Wilson.
So, Mr. Nation, are you talking about better labelling of products so consumers can actually vote with their feet if they see products that have a zero carbon or low carbon, some kind of way of rewarding farmers for taking those efforts? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm referring to a competitive marketplace where anyone marketing their product would see an advantage of having that claim.
Okay. And is there any work going to go? I mean, obviously we've talked a bit about country of origin labelling today and seafood, but is there any restrictions at the moment to, for example, milk retailers and supply chains getting together to? Is there any legislative restrictions to that kind of stuff going on labels?
Labels are
need to
definitely
be-
not our expertise, Senator, so...
Might be worth thinking about in terms of your future expertise, because I'm guessing, Minister, it's going to require some kind of audit process to be able to verify those claims.
Yep.
So these are the kind of things we need to be thinking about if we're going to...
Well, the good news, Senator Wilson, is that now that we have a government that is prepared to do something about climate change, we can actually start thinking about some of these things.
Indeed.
And I think the other, it'll probably come up when we talk with MLA as well, but the other important thing around the supply chain that I think Mr. Nation's referring to is that increasingly we see international customers insisting on higher and higher sustainability standards. We used to have a government that used to pretend the rest of the world didn't care about these things. We now have a government that recognises they do, and we want to help farmers in Australia be able to continue exporting by doing these things.
Indeed. Could I ask, perhaps Mr. Nation or any of the... Did you want to say something, by the way?
I just wanted to add, I mean, and you focus on the additives, but when we talk about climate change, methane mitigation, what we can do in terms of mitigating our greenhouse gas emissions, there is obviously a strong link to productivity gain.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
We've done some work around marginal abatement cost curves, different technologies that are available out there. A lot of them have a strong link to productivity, which also lead to the spin-off benefit of reducing our carbon emissions. So, you know, there is, you know, our whole R&D agenda, we believe, is strongly intertwined with delivering really great results in this space.
Yep.
And not just purely through the feed additive side. Just want to make that point. And to the point about the market drivers, absolutely. I mean, we've got a sustainability framework that's made some pretty significant commitments, about a 30% reduction in emissions intensity by 2030 from 2015 baseline. That's got the whole industry buy-in, drivers from processors through the marketplace, which they're all actively pursuing. So, there's some things to take confidence out of.
And as just a broad statement, if you like, I mean, how do your members feel about climate change and making these kind of commitments to lowering emissions? Are farmers generally on board with the need to do this, or is there still resistance?
Are you an advocacy body, gentlemen? No.
No, but in terms of their services that they're offering the farmers, in terms of the pathway to lowering emissions, is obviously important for your members, but do dairy farmers, are they on board with climate action and reducing emissions?
I think the best thing to do is to restate the policy of industry, which is that the industry is looking to reduce emissions between 2015 and 2030 by 30%. That's a stated industry target of the whole dairy supply chain. And our role in all of that is to come up with technical solutions that achieve that. So it's great. I think it's fantastic for the industry to have a target and the industry leadership to endorse it, and then it's our role to deliver productivity and
Mr. Nations,
climate-related R&D.
So, Mr. Nations, whose role is it then, if you come up with the solutions and you've got a target, whose role is it then to get farmers on board to adopt those solutions so we actually get there?
So it is one of our roles to
Yeah.
actively develop and extend successful research. So where we see successful opportunities, where we see farmers can make an economic difference on their farm, it's very much a significant part of our role. We have a significant number of extension officers around the country. We're increasing the number of those roles that have a deeper understanding of climate to be able to help farmers make those practical changes.
Okay. In terms of what's happening across the ditch in New Zealand, they're levying their industry to reinvest. Excuse me. Seriously, grow up. They're leveraging. They're levying the industry to put money directly into research and development to lower emissions. Are you watching closely with the kind of things they're going to be investing in, and are we doing similar things here?
Again, maybe I'd best answer that question. So one of the things New Zealand has done for many, many years, well before this became a hot political topic, is have a whole range of New Zealand R&D institutes work together into what they call the Greenhouse Gas Consortium. And so they've been undertaking a broad range of research and development for a long time. And I think one of the latest discussions about this mechanism is the quantum of money that can be invested in research. So this is not a new thing for New Zealand. This is not a new thing for Australia. This is not a new thing globally to invest in R&D for this purpose. And I think they're a much bigger dairy industry than ours. Yep. They're a very strong pasture-based dairy industry than ours. We collaborate actively on an R&D basis between academics here and in New Zealand, and ideally, it's the collective action of both countries and more countries all operating together to deliver the technical solutions that will ultimately benefit farmers.
So we might be able to free ride on some of their hard work, Mr. Nation.
It would be nice if they have a win. It would be nice to share it.
All right, great, thank you. Look, I'll put some other questions to you on notice on that. But just in relation to a question I asked yesterday to the department about fertiliser prices, there was an article in the yesterday in The Guardian by Matt Daglish about a lack of transparency around fertiliser prices. Is this an issue that's been raised with you at all? Is there any initiatives around within Dairy Australia around making prices more transparent between imports and local retail prices? Is it an issue that's raised as a concern?
Not explicitly in the way that you've presented, Senator, but what we have taken on our own bat is to try and make it transparent about what kind of input costs are out there in the system. I mentioned before about this new purchased input index, which does have... Could
you say that again?
We've got a purchased input price index, which highlights fertiliser as one of the key cost components and shows how that is moving from period to period, and adding some transparency to that marketplace.
And are you basing that purchase input price index on just collecting current prices at a retail level, or are you
from publicly available sources? I'd have to check on the exact source on that.
Because I'm interested especially in sort of what clarity we've got around import prices. I understand they're
imports, right? Okay.
There are some international indexes that that you can access in terms of port prices, but nothing here in Australia.
We're talking more about the actual price that farmers are paying as opposed to the import side.
Yeah, look, I know they're close. Import prices are obviously close related to the current prices, but you don't have any other kind of granular data.
Not that I'm aware, no.
Are you aware of a service called episode3.net that trying to run a consensus for farmers at the moment to find out what they're paying for fertiliser so they can put together a more accurate
Not aware of that.
assessment of current prices. All right, well, I might put some other questions to you on notice on that as well. That's it for me, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Wilson. Yes, Senator McKenzie.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of Senator Whish-Wilson's questioning around seaweed additives, etc., in the methane situation, would it be correct to say that the dairy industry is predominantly a pasture-based industry in Australia?
That is correct.
Yeah. So my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't been in this space for a little while, is that those types of additives for maximum success are predominantly best used within a feedlot system of production.
That's correct.
That's correct. So the notion that we can take seaweed pellets, for want of a better word, that are suited to a feedlot production system and somehow make our Australian dairy herd eat them all whilst they're enjoying the very luscious grass that Mr Mann's ensuring is grown on his farm down south, is ridiculous, isn't it?
Can I add something here, Senator McKenzie?
I'm asking the independent
There's also
RDC.
lick blocks. There's lick blocks. It won't be necessarily suitable in every situation, but the point
No,
is...
I understand there's a range of... Okay,
The point is...
Go for it.
No,
Tell me
no.
about the lick blocks.
Well, why don't I let the RDC talk a bit more about lick blocks and MLA can as
You
well.
do so well, Senator.
But
I did ask about supplements.
there are... Yeah, the point I'm making...
Gentlemen, it's interesting that I've asked a legitimate question of the RDC,
and
who
feel free.
actually are more in touch with dairy farmers for a longer period of time than either three of us, and they have categorically said it is a supplementary system predominantly beneficial to feedlot systems, and the other fact that the only two questions I've asked, the other fact that they've agreed with is that in Australia, our dairy industry is predominantly pasture-based. So 2 fact questions. I would like to continue my questions.
We don't need a lecture.
No, you've both been yabbering at me.
No, I was just answering... I'm happy for you to ask questions. I was trying to be helpful and give you some information.
And then
Because I've actually... I'm not sure about you, but I've actually gone and met with some of the Asparagopsis manufacturers and heard a bit about what they do. I'd be happy to introduce you to them
We
sometime.
are looking at broad-scale application, by the way, but if you knew anything about...
We've been going so well. Senator
asked
McKenzie,
for
just
protection.
Senator McKenzie, do you always have to have the last word? I was going to defend you then. Honestly, like a naughty little girl, can you just be quiet while someone finishes? You don't have to have the last word.
Chair,
No, you can't. Because I'm going to do me block in a minute. Senator McKenzie, no, you can't. Senator McKenzie, you have the call. I was listening intently and the Minister, I thought, was going to try and assist you. But Senator McKenzie, you will be able to ask your question in silence and then we'll sit back and we'll... No, I don't know. Senator Whish-Wilson, I don't want any more... Senator Whish-Wilson, okay, no. No, I don't care. No, because you're all as bad as each other. Senator
need to
McKenzie.
withdraw that comment.
No, I will not withdraw it because I'm probably the most easiest one to get along with. But at the moment, you're all going like this. Senator McKenzie, you have Matt, do me a favour. Senator McKenzie, just ask your question. No, Matt, don't add to it because I've just told Peter no. Senator McKenzie, ask your question.
Point of order here.
I tell you what,
I think
people,
it is within the rights of other
friendship, Peter.
senators, and I've been on the other side of the debate here with Senator Whish-Wilson, but he is have a right to raise points and issues with you, and I don't think shutting it off is going to be helpful for the general goodwill among this committee.
Senator Canavan, I'm desperately trying to keep some civility in here. I do allow people to have, cross talks and that sort of stuff. I'm telling you right now, Senator McKenzie, you have the call. Ask your questions.
Thank you, Chair. But on the point of order that Senator Whish-Wilson raised, asking you to withdraw calling me a naughty little girl...
Yes, all right, I'll take that back. You're not a naughty little girl. I apologise. Now, do you want to ask your question?
Is the comment with... thank you,
I've
Chair.
withdrawn. I just said you're not a naughty little girl. Your call. You do like
What
the last
cost?
word.
What cost to the processor exists to change labels how would that cost be transferred to consumers? So when we talk about Senator Whish-Wilson's comments on the sustainability measures, etc., that will require processors to obviously change their labelling of certain products to the consumer. We've got a minister who's saying it won't result in cost increases of milk at the checkout. What is the reality to processors of label changes, please?
Very significant, Senator. I don't have the exact costs of what it costs, but you're thinking about product that's in storage that already has existing packaging. We've seen some of this in the international trade space where product labelling requirements change, and that imposes significant cost for the processor in terms of getting all their production lines changed and shifted and packaging remodelled. So it's a significant cost. I don't have the,
If you could go maybe seek some advice from processors, even a few different products, and what the cost, and would they be pushing that back down the line to the farmer to recoup, or would they pushing it up the line to the consumer to pay? I think...
And again, to make clear, there's absolutely no proposal to mandate a change in labelling. So if a processor chose to do that, because they saw a competitive advantage, then that's a matter for them, but there's no proposal whatsoever to mandate labelling changes in the way that I think you're implying, Senator Mackenzie.
I think we're all just trying to raise the point that going down this path will have costs, and the question, as always, is who is going to pay those?
Well, but
Minister.
if that was true, why has the industry been doing this?
To walk down this path and assume that no one has to pay is kidding yourself.
If that's true, why has the industry already been reducing its methane emissions? Why has the industry already been reducing its emissions more generally?
Methane emissions haven't been reducing.
They have.
No, they haven't. Well, maybe I noticed if you could provide the information.
Sure.
No, they haven't. I mean, not per.
To what rate,
not
Minister?
Not per
You're saying
unit
they're
production.
reducing?
No, what I'm saying
No,
is that we finally have a government that is actually working with industry.
Yeah, they're being reducing, Minister.
More of the things that they're already doing.
Please
I know
inform
you
the
had a
committee. You can ask
decade
your
of putting your heads in the stand and pretending that this stuff wasn't happening around the world, but you know what? We've all woken up.
Chair.
And we're now on board, and we're actually working out what needs to be done, and we're backing industry to do the things that they're doing, and all the years of pretending the world isn't changing have ended, and we're helping industry. We're helping them to do more of what they're already doing so that they can improve their productivity, cut their costs, remain internationally competitive, things that you people wanted to stop industry from doing. That is over.
Minister, you just made the statement to Senate estimates that methane emissions have been reducing in this country.
Yes.
Please outline the figures.
I'm happy to come back to you with some information
You can
about
ask
that
your
on notice.
secretary, he's right there. I'm sure
happy.
there's someone around that
I've
can
already.
assist you.
I want to give you a very good answer.
You don't know the
Not that it
answer.
will actually convince you, because again, you guys don't want to believe any of this stuff. But I will
You'll
do
blame
my.
us.
I will
You'll
come
blame-
back with the best information I possibly can.
It'll be our fault.
Secretary Metcalfe, have methane emissions been reducing in Australia, and if so, by what rate?
I think the Minister's response related to the agriculture sector, Senator, and in particular I think he was referring to work that's been undertaken by MLA, and they'll be able to give evidence to the committee after this.
We're looking forward to those questions. On notice?
Got basically no change.
If I can provide anything further, I will.
Because my understanding of what the Minister said was,
we
specifically said methane emissions have been
Senator, we had
reducing.
quite a discussion about this yesterday, and we talked about the proportion of methane produced in Australia produced by agriculture, and we talked about the fact that globally there are obviously significant trading and other issues associated with greenhouse gases. So I won't repeat everything that was put on the Hansard yesterday, but there was quite a significant discussion about it.
Thank you. No more questions, Chair.
Senator Canavan, Senator McDonald, that's it.
Just one question.
Senator McDonald.
Thanks very much for coming today. I just want to ask you specifically around this measurement issue of methane and emissions. Do you have suitable methodology for measuring methane now and methane changes as a result of whatever instruments that might be employed?
Maybe that's one for me. Thanks, Senator McDonald. I think as a country we should be really proud of some of our local innovations. So in the Victorian government the research agency, Agriculture Victoria, over the last 10 years has refined quite a remarkable method of measuring methane from cows. It's available for you to see at their research station at Ellenbank, and they use it extensively. So it has always been one of our challenges to measure methane in grazing animals out in the paddock. And they have now got amazingly strong results in using a backpack on cows that measures methane, and it's got very strong relationships to, the intensive measurement of methane from house cows. So it's a remarkable Australian technology. It means that we can look at methane at scale, and it's a real asset for Australia at this time.
So you've got farms that are using this, trialling this measurement.
It's only on the research station. It requires an intensive technician support to be able to do this measurement.
Okay, so this is the point that I want to get to, is that if your farm X with, 400 or 500 dairy cows and a production system, is there any support? How is it that farm can say, well, my methane production was 100 and now it's 70? How are they measuring what feedstocks, what productivity measures they're putting into place so that they can be part of whatever industry is committing to? How does that happen?
So the way we've arranged it as an industry, Senator McDonald, is we've participated in a global standards process. So the International Dairy Federation has recently, in the last 6 months, released its updated standards for measuring carbon footprinting on dairy property. We, in turn, have updated we're following that international standard.
I'm sorry, which country did do the measurement in?
This is the International Dairy Federation has updated global standards for measuring carbon footprinting on dairy farms so that it's consistent across the world. Because what we want to do as a country is be able to speak to the changes that we make in a consistent way, in a competitive way against other dairy industries as an export country. So every farmer in this country now can measure their greenhouse gas footprint. But I'd have to take on notice whether that divides up the different greenhouse gases, but there's a comprehensive way of looking at all of the farm inputs, the way the farm operation is set up. Yeah. It's what we call Dairy Base. It's a farm benchmarking program that's been available for many years from Dairy Australia. Yeah. It asks a few supplementary questions over the usual questions on how the farm is performing, and you can get a very effective global standard carbon footprint.
What percentage of dairy farmers engage with Dairy Base?
I'd have to get the latest number, but my understanding, most recent data I have is that there's at least 1,800 records on Dairy Base.
Right, so 1,800 farms, not 300 farms registering 6 times.
So in terms of the data we've got, since 2017, we've got about 200 dairy farms that have been actively using this carbon calculator, which is aligned to the Dairy Base tool. Mm-hmm. So, and that's a growing number. And the aim is to get 60% of our farms undertaking their emissions profile by 2025.
Okay. So again, is there any assistance programs, subsidies, grants, extension officers who are assisting dairy farms to move to engage in that measurement program?
Yeah, so one of the things we've waited for, Senator, is for the updated global standards, so that when farmers go out and measure now, they're measuring to a global standard. So that standard has recently been published. We've just updated our Dairy Australia infrastructure. We're just about to embark on an extension program with extension officers capable of driving up uptake of this on-farm measurement and benchmarking.
Okay, so what I want to be clear about is that the Australian government has made a commitment to the methane pledge. Agricultural industries have supported the pledge in principle, but I want us to be very clear about what technology exists, what actual measurements are in place, because otherwise it's just words, isn't it? And when we are going to rely on this, this pledge, this commitment to access trade markets, to receive prices in the overseas market, we have to be able to defend it. We have to have data that supports it. And in the beef sustainability framework, that was something that Red Meat worked very hard on, is saying, well, there are all these measures, but which one do we actually have data for? And I just think, you know, the Minister's taken on notice that he's going to get the reductions in methane in the agricultural industry, but I will just be fascinated to see if it's models that's come out of an overseas program, or do we actually have measures here in Australia that farmers can go and say, great, I've done this, it's increased my productivity, my calves are doing better, and here's my methane measurement. Because until we're at that point, then we're going to spend money on something that we can't track. It's like that management thing, is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
It's a fair question, Senator McDonald. It would have been good if we'd started this a long time earlier, but now we're starting.
Senator Watt, I appreciate that you want to make this political, but for farmers who are on the ground...
No, I'm just making the point. It would be, I agree with you, better measurement would be good. Being further advanced on supplements would be good. Doing all of these things would be good, and I would have preferred a lot of this work started earlier. It didn't. It's now well underway, and we intend to progress it further.
Well, I appreciate you trying to make a political comment around an industry that was struggling with drought, with lower than the cost of production prices for their milk, with shortage of workforce.
I'm not blaming the industry.
No, well, industry drives these things. This is not for government to drive.
My experience is that industry's been waiting for a lot of these things to be done for a very long time.
I think the research has been going on for a very long time. Mr Nation or Mr Mann, Senator Watt, the Minister is claiming that we've really only started to think about these things since he took on the mantle of Agriculture Minister. The reality is the industry and the RDCs more broadly have been researching these sort of products for a very, very long time. Can anyone have a historical mindset that goes back enough to give us some sort of guideline of how long we've actually been looking into these types of solutions?
You're helping us show our age, are you, Senator?
Well, you know, none of us are spring chickens around this table.
I've been lucky enough to be an agricultural scientist for a while, Senator, and it has been a research topic for a significant period of time, and it has been a
2 years? 2 years? 5 years?
A number of years. Look, I mean, people have been studying feeding cows and the impact it has on diet and byproducts for decades, but specifically focusing on methane and reducing methane is a more recent science in terms of its focus of study. There was obviously a whole lot of work before industries make their own statements about what difference they can make.
That's right.
Our challenge, and I think joining the dots between the conversations we've had so far, and especially Senator McDonald's point, is we won't fully succeed until we've miniaturised or made effective methane measurement on a commercial farm rather than on a research station.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the grand challenges of agriculture, so that we can then know what difference we're making and make appropriate claims. The point I made earlier is we've done some fantastic work on research stations, and there's a whole collective of agricultural scientists that have added to the knowledge of feeding cows and methane reduction. I think our greatest challenge is that we've found many false starts in this space. We've found many potential leads to reduce methane that have ended up having only a short-term effect and being ultimately unsuccessful. I think that's why people are so excited about seaweed as a genuine possible success story. And I think now we can see a ramp up of effort related to both prospective feed additives for methane, where they didn't necessarily exist. And we can also see that technology is moving really fast in things like miniaturisation that might ultimately end up being a measurement technology too. So I'd refrain from making any comment about times and eras other than to say agricultural science has been a very good asset to the industry.
Over a long period of time. Thank you.
No further questions? Okay. Mr. Mann and crew, thank you very much. We'll let you get going. Travel safely back to South Oz or wherever you came from, ladies and gentlemen, as well. And we'll now call Meat and Livestock Australia. Now, I know Senator Roberts has some questions from MLA, so is it all right to kick off with Senator Roberts?
Well, McDonald's on our side. Susan?
Have you got much, Malcolm? I'm in the hands of my
running behind
Given we're-
time,
of
if we
my
could
colleagues on the.
Can we
be a bit more tight on our
Yeah,
questions.
oh, I'd be for that.
That's it, I think, because we've got this hard marker.
Senator Roberts, can you squeeze yours into 10 minutes, please? But I'm always keen while the officials are making their way to give the call to our members of the committee first, but with your indulgence, Senator Canavan, thank you. And I'll keep it. I'll give you a reminder when we get close to 10 minutes.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome, gentlemen. Did you wish to make an opening statement?
Alan Beckett, Chair of MLA. Like our previous speaker was just talking about, our industry is also suffering certain floods down the east coast. I know our own property in northeast of Victoria, we've been under flood now, or 3/4 of our property's been under flood for just on a month. So we know a little bit about it, learning a lot about fishing actually, but it's pretty devastating. But having said all that, the industry is still doing remarkably well. The prices for cattle are just off the all-time high of last year, but they're still well above the 5-year and 10-year averages for cattle prices. And lamb is variable, but it's still very high compared to previous years. So all in all, from a financial point of view, the industry's doing well. The cattle projections indicate that the herd is 5.6% up, and about 27.5 million head now. And this is before the current floods, but we haven't heard major issues about losses of cattle. Sheep might be a different issue, but sheep projections also, the flock's up 7.2%, about 76 million head. Just share with you a couple of things that have been going on at MLA. Community sentiment research has just come in, and I can share with you that 3 in 5 Australians feel good about the beef and lamb industry. Perceptions about the red meat industry are relatively strong. 1 in 3 metropolitan Australians feel they are knowledgeable about the industry, and 60% of metropolitan Australians have a strong level of trust with the red meat industry, which is really encouraging. We've been spending a lot of time pushing adoption of our research and development in the last 12 months or so, and I can report that activities now are it's about a 54.3 million annual net benefits from adoption in the last 12 months. And more than 10,000 producers have actually attended our industry functions. And further, Meat Standards Australia, MSA, current reports in that the benefits for producers, farm gate benefits, are about 204 million for the last 12 months. And over the life of MSA, that's about over $1 billion. So it's fairly impressive sort of returns from the MSA project. So as I said at the start, I think there are issues, but we're really looking forward to a very strong sort of 2023. And we'd welcome any questions, Chair, that you may have of us.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett, and I will go to Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for attending today. Can I start by confirming, Mr. Strong, that the Sustainability Update 2021, this document, is designed to provide an update on the progress of carbon neutral by 2030 roadmap?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, thank you. That was quick, Chair. I note the new document reproduces the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we're all the way with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Is Meat and Livestock Australia endorsing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals relevant to the Meat and Livestock Association, which I believe is 8 of the goals? Is that correct?
No, Senator, it's not our position to endorse those goals. We're just referencing them in the program. So if people are aware of those broader commitments that have been made by the UN, for example, they can see where the activities in CN30 align up with that.
So is that driving you in any way? guiding you?
Like
Strategy?
like I said, Senator, it's just a reference.
Just a reference, okay. So you've got here in prime position on page 5, sustainability, Australian red meat and livestock industry alignment with global goals.
So it's referencing those goals. So
But you're aligned with it.
Well, it's a reference. It's just saying, so the goal is to be CN30 as a industry. I think the important part of that document, Senator, is what's on the front page. I think the statement's something like the driver's behind, no, the very front page, the driver, you might even want to read it out.
Our industry is driven to be, this is you're quoting you, our industry is driven to be productive and profitable, intergenerationally sustainable and leaving the environment in better shape. And then you go on to feature the UN sustainability goals.
The reason why we put that comment up front, though, Minister, Senator, is that's the most important part of it. Is that the efforts the efforts we have in this place and the focus that we have in this space are very much driven by the profitability and production of our producers and industry.
Which of the goals, UN sustainability goals, does red meat fit into?
I don't have that in front of me, Senator, and as I mentioned, it's just a reference. The more important piece of the things that we're investing in as a research and development corporation to support our producers and the industry to be more sustainable while they can still be productive and profitable. That's the focus of.
So you said while they can still be profitable, sustainability. Surely, if it was genuine sustainability, then they would be supported by that. It wouldn't be opposite. It's not productivity versus sustainability. If there's genuine sustainability, sustainability would help profitability. But your language betrays the UN. That's what the UN sustainability goals are not possible without subsidies. So the UN is really about profit or sustainability. Now, what is it?
We think it's both.
I don't have a position on the UN's role,
Okay.
Minister, but Senator, sorry. But our view is that you can actually be profitable, productive and sustainable.
Okay, thank you. With the beef with the MLAs 8 that have been targeted in this document, which is not yours, the number of sustainable development goals to which each RDC contributes, there are 8 for the Meat and Livestock Australia. They are zero hunger, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life on the land, peace, justice and strong institutions. Have you got KPIs for each of those 8?
As I mentioned to start with, Senator, it's a reference to those goals. They're not goals that we've set.
Okay, let's get on to the nuts and bolts then. What's the average weekly adult consumption of red meat and red meat products in Australia?
Depends how it's measured, but the red meat and red meat products.
Yes.
Did you say?
Red meat products being sausages, mince.
Yeah, across all species. I'm not exactly sure, Minister. Actually, the total protein consumption is nearly 90 kilos, and red meat's the majority, the largest contributor to that. The beef consumption that comes out of the ABARES figures, which is as sold, is just over 19 kilos, which is the actual consumed.
Over what
product.
period?
That's annually.
Annually, okay.
Yeah.
The United Nations is pushing for a 30% reduction in methane production by 2030. How will that affect Australian red meat production?
I'm not sure the two things are as closely connected as where you're heading, Senator. The commitments that the red meat sector has, and particularly the CN30 commitment, which was made in 2017, is about a path to being carbon neutral as far as the total contribution to the National Greenhouse Gas Emissions Inventory is concerned, and doing that in a way where the industry increases its production and profitability at the same time.
We need to get down to nuts and bolts because there's systems that drive behaviour, including farmers' behaviour. So the 2021 update says, and I'll quote it, the red meat sector has reduced carbon dioxide production by 53% since the 2005 baseline. What does that mean?
So that the current number is actually 59% now, Senator, and that's a number which has been calculated by CSIRO using the National Greenhouse Gas Emissions. Yeah, by using the National Greenhouse.
What does it mean?
CSIRO?
No. What does that statement mean? It's in your booklet.
So it's the reduction across the industry of the contribution to the national greenhouse gas emissions inventory.
Based on 2005?
Since the baseline of 2005.
So it's going below 2005?
In 2005, the contribution that the red meat sector made to the national greenhouse gas emissions inventory was just over 20%, and it's now just over 10%. That's what it means.
Can I just keep going through these? Unless I get the time.
I'll ask after you.
There's only 8 years left. We are where we are now, and what measures will be needed to get to 100%?
So where we are now, and as you mentioned, Senator, there's 8 years left on that goal that the industry set in 2017. So we've more than halved the contribution to the national greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and we've got, as you mentioned, the roadmap that lays out the things that we'll invest in and develop over the next 8 years to take us the rest of that journey.
So let me understand a bit more. Genetics, feed management, feedlot, fattening, as opposed to grass finishing, all help, right?
Yes.
Okay. But they're already doing these things, so close to saturation, as I understand it. So what else have you got?
They're not close to saturation, Senator. There's a long list of things. To date, we've invested between $140 and $150 million in research and development, and there's a runway roadmap for about the same level of investment over the next few years to head us towards that goal.
So isn't it what you've really got to do, what you're really going to have to do in order to reach a 100% reduction to 2005 levels by 2030 is to cut production?
No, Senator, not at all. Absolutely not. Okay.
Yes.
So as I see it, this could be another major industry being derailed.
No,
the UN has
Senator.
put goals out with regard to food, and they're basically wanting to cut food. They've stated that. The UN has put out goals regarding different energy, which they really mean no energy. And the UN has put out different cars, electric vehicles. They really mean no cars for the masses. This is what they said. The UN has put out goals for... The UN calls for initially 500 grams per week of red meat, which is 70 grams per day. And they failed to get endorsement for much, much lower. That's what the UN's saying.
So, Senator, I'm Managing Director of Meat and Livestock Australia. We're a service organisation for the Australian red meat sector.
Who are you
And
serving?
We're committed to the productivity and profitability of the red meat sector, intergenerational sustainability of the sector, and leaving the environment in better shape. We are not aligned to the UN goals. We're not driven by the UN goals. We understand individuals' concern with those things. They are not the things that are driving our decisions or investments, which we make on behalf of the industry and with the industry. And our absolute focus is on the profitability and productivity and intergenerational sustainability of our sector.
So I understand that, last question, Chair, I understand that some of these documents have gone from being fairly prominent on MLA's website to being obscure.
No, I'm not at all, Senator. I'm more than happy to provide hard copies, soft copies,
I've got 'em.
links to, arrows to, points to, extra versions.
A way to increase profitability for a few
No,
is
Senator,
to cut the
no.
herd and dramatically increase the meat prices.
No, I'm aware of the comments that you made in the Senate about that, and Senator, that is absolutely not the truth. The commitment of MLA is about the long-term profitability and productivity of the sector and supporting the red meat production across the country.
So we won't have farmers scratching around, sitting in a town, relying on carbon credits, carbon dioxide credits, while the others make money.
I will have to remind you of the time, Senator Roberts.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for your discipline.
Senator Still?
Yeah.
I just about a quick one.
Yeah,
I was just on
absolutely.
the back of Senator Roberts' questions and just referring to the 57% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from the Australian red meat industry that was referred there. What proportion of that reduction is due to deforestation changes or reforestation, whichever way you want to word it?
So it's 59, and I'm not exactly sure the proportion, Senator, but a chunk, it's a material chunk of that.
Well,
59.
it's strange that in your reports you sort of refer to the CSIRO, but you never break out the details of that report. When I go to that CSIRO report, it's a little bit hard to see because it's in graphs, not data, but it would appear over 80% of that reduction is due to the conversion of pastoral lands to forestry.
Well, the land use change measure, and like I said, Senator, I'm not exactly sure of the measure. It is material, and we'll get that number for you.
But the question here, Mr. Strong, is you're pumping out in your documents, very headline, that we've reduced emissions by 57%, when in fact, when you go to the detail, basically all of that is just due to largely state government laws, which have restricted pastoral activities across the country. That's not really what when you read your documents, that's not what you take away. You take away the message that somehow the cattle industry has been very focused on reducing emissions and has achieved this remarkable 57% reduction. To me, your documents are quite misleading.
That's certainly not the intent, Senator, and it's not the only thing. There's a range of other things.
Oh, as I say, I've got the figure. I'm happy for you to take on notice, if you could.
More than happy to take that on notice.
And the figure I've got is 83% of those reductions are due to restriction to red tape placed on your sector. The red tape, may I say, that your industry and the industry bodies in this sector adamantly oppose and want to see changed.
Yeah, we'll get the number
Thank
for you.
you.
Senator. Yep, no problem.
What I might do now is go to the most qualified person in the Senate to talk about red meat. Who would that be?
Consumption patterns, Chair, or,
because you are the red meat person.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning.
Morning,
Great to see you. Great to talk about this important topic. And I think we've had a bit of discussion this morning about the role that these commitments play in assuring, Australia's 70% production system that goes into export markets. And I appreciate that and I value that, and I think that everybody in the industry has that in mind. However, what I wanted to focus on this morning was some of the questions you would have heard me asking the dairy industry about, is just what is the measurements that are in place, and how does the grazier who's on a holding out at Claremont or Cloncurry or somewhere else understand what the inputs are and what the measurements are?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And I think, as we all appreciate, this is a reasonably new space. So the commitment that was made in 2017 is only a short 5 years ago, but it's also a fast-moving space, and we understand a lot more now than what we did then. We don't have to go back very far, and the perception was that there's no way you could reduce methane by ruminant, and now we know that with supplements you can reduce that by more than 90%. How we measure that is really important. So at a research level, there's very accurate measures. So the methane chambers that have been used for quite a long time to measure methane production by animals over a period of time. That's a well-worn and recognised path. Some of the research that we are now doing is exactly tackling the challenge that you're raising, and there's actually quite a good article in this special edition of Feedback that we produced last year, which talks about Darren and Melanie Hanlon's operation at Serena in North Queensland, and they have got a long track record of investing in technologies to measure production and input, and one of the things that they're using are these RFID reading feeders, which have a manifold in them which actually measures the methane being produced by the animal in a grazing environment. It's a research and development project to test if that works. There are other feeders that are similar called green feeders, which are being used by some of the companies, at least one of the companies, that is commercialising the Asparagopsis seaweed to measure the impact of that. So there's a number of things that we're working on to be able to get commercial broader scale measurements of methane production over and above the research measures. Because largely the methane production or greenhouse gas accounting frameworks at the moment use quite a bit of modelling based off the research which has been done. So how we secure and support that going forward is really important.
Is there programs that support producers to start acquiring this technology? I don't know, what would it cost for an RFI reader on a feeder like that? Is that have to have the software?
I'm not sure, Senator. I assume those feeders are expensive. They're not unsimilar to the net feed intake individual feed measurers that we have, which are quite expensive. So they're still a research tool. But in the first instance, what they will do is add more ground truth data to the calculations and the projections of how much methane is being produced and what progress can be made with other interventions like supplements.
One of my neighbours at Yea, Senator, is Stud, and they've got 4 of these units off their own bat. I don't know the cost of them, but I know they're not cheap.
Yeah, I think that's a reality, isn't it? Seed stock producers, feedlots, more intensive productions will be able to move to that sort of investment in technology more quickly than a broad-scale operation that might be having to destock during dry periods and, has a more lumpy production system.
But like everything, these will get cheaper as they get developed.
Yes. So if it's not... before I move off to broad scale, so the 90% reduction that you just quoted there, it's my understanding from commercial feedlot operators that I've spoken to recently, they're not getting those sort of results. So how are we going to, as an industry, translate the early stage research results and the reality of the commercial usage? How are you incorporating that into projections and programs?
Yeah, so we have a number of the later stage R&D, validation R&D programs going now. I think the majority, if not all of those, are actually co-funded programs with commercial partners, which are doing exactly what you're looking for in demonstrating how repeatable those initial studies were. And there was a number of those initial studies that demonstrated the level of reduction in methane production from using a supplement. And those larger scale commercial trials are now underway. And again, we've got to remember that this is still pretty early stage. There's been a lot of progress made in a very short period of time. But one of the things I think gives us comfort that there's something significant here, and whether the number's 90 or 95 or 85, where it sits, is that the results out of the Asparagopsis trial, so the seaweed trials, and also the trials with 3-NOP, which is a synthetic version of the same type of thing, are very similar. So there's absolutely evidence that a supplement is able to significantly reduce the methane produced by a ruminant, and how we then support the development of a range of commercial products to do that, and then how they're delivered out to the broader scale industry of those next phases that we're focusing on.
So I think the peak industry bodies and RDCs who are supporting the Minister's pledge, methane pledge sign-up, the on-the-ground feedback that I'm getting from particularly rangelands producers and broad-scale producers is they just are not seeing the technology and the measurable, the ability to measure in any sort of format yet. Remembering that the feedlot proportion is, say, 100 days of the animal's life, 400 if you're an intensive feeder, but on average 100. But the 2 years prior to that, that's the portion that you can't just reduce methane for 100 days of a 2.5-year cycle, can you? So I'm keen to understand, what is it that we've committed to this pledge, government's committed to this pledge, the Minister said that there'll be no taxes or financial impositions. So what is it that the government is going to do to support the practical adoption of supplements, feeders, measurement across the broader industry?
It's not a question for us.
I was going to say, if the question is what is the government going to do, maybe I should answer
You
that.
probably, yes, I'm sorry, that is
Again,
better.
happy to provide you a lot more information, either through a briefing or on notice, but in general terms, some of the things that we've done, obviously we made the $8 million commitment in the budget, which was an election commitment around further support for the Asparagopsis industry. As I mentioned to Senator Whish-Wilson previously, Minister Bowen and I recently announced $5 million worth of grants for a range of companies working on different types of supplements, admittedly in the R&D sort of space, still early stage. But we intend, and obviously MLA can talk to you further about the things that they're doing, which involves, as you would know, a mixture of industry and government funding. But we certainly intend as a government to be increasing the level of support for industry in the adoption of these sorts of technologies. I made the point yesterday reminding people that the methane pledge is not a binding target, it's an aspirational goal, but it is something we want to contribute to, and we're happy to put our money where our mouth is. Just while I'm speaking, to answer the question earlier, I have been able to get some initial advice from ABARES about methane emissions. I know Senator Mackenzie and Senator Canavan were scoffing at the suggestion that methane emissions in agriculture have fallen. The information I've received from ABARES is that methane emissions from Australian agriculture have already fallen over time. For agriculture, methane emissions declined 16.8% between 2000 and 2010 and 6.3% between 2010 and 2020. And the total reduction is 22% from 2000 to 2020.
During a coalition government, fantastic.
From 74.6 megatons of carbon dioxide, or whatever CO2e is, to 58.2 megatons. So, and the reason I was saying that is that what we're doing is more of what industry is already doing.
Can I just follow up? You might not have heard because there's a lot of interjections. I asked it per unit, or could you take that?
I'd have to come back with you on
you'd
that.
have to come back on notice. So,
but I think, if you look at what I was saying,
per head or per
yeah, and of course that's not what I was saying. What I was talking about was agricultural methane emissions.
So thank you for that. Would you please take on notice to go back to ABARES and ask what their source documents are?
Sure.
Because I remain concerned that a lot of this is being modelled, and for the producer on the ground, they don't have the technology to measure.
Mm-hmm.
So if ABARES is asking for this data, where are they sourcing it from?
I'm happy to get that information for you.
Yeah, terrific. Okay, thank you. Look, I think then back to the MLA. So what programs are you planning to put in place, particularly through extension, I think we're talking about now? So you've got the R happening over here, but the extension on the ground, that this is actually a measurable, achievable program, that farmers not going to be left behind in, because of cost, because of deliverability.
Yeah, Senator, over the last 5 years, this has been a core part of our activities. When we put our 5-year 2025 strategic plan together, our investment in sustainability, so broader than just the CM30, but sustainability was one of the 3 focus areas for us. So we've been very focused in this area in not just our research and development, but our communication. And it's new. That's why I keep coming back to this as a new space. So the level of awareness and interest is something that's got to grow and build over time. Of course, with the change in policy and commentary, awareness goes up significantly. And we've got a bit of a stepping in front of each other. So we've probably been out in front of many of our members as far as information is concerned, and then many of them probably haven't seen a lot of what we've been doing, so we've got to play catch up with that. But since 2020 even, we've had carbon accounting methodology tools available that other people have produced and that are available to the industry, available on our website, and we've been talking about. We've also produced a sheep and beef greenhouse accounting framework, which is aligned to the national greenhouse gas emissions, so people can use that, the gas inventory. So people can use that to get a bit of a ballpark of where they're up to. We also have a Carbon 101 online training module that people can access anytime on the website to start kicking along the broader knowledge and information in this space. So it's a big focus of our communication and extension and adoption, but we are also investing from a research and development side in a range of tools. So in addition to those measurement tools we were talking about before, UQ has got a project which we're working with them on for a saliva test. so which is a simpler and easier way to capture a result than having a feeder in the yard. And it was starting, and this is one of the neat things that we see in so much of our collaborative research, where we have these positive unintended consequences. So the reason initially that was being looked at was to see if we could pick genetic differences between animals as far as their methane production was concerned, but it also may turn out to be a good tool to measure progress that we're making as well. So it's a multi-pronged approach, communication, extension, and also the types of research that we're tackling.
So just to finish on one last question, I'm reminded of when the MLA were making a decision about pain relief for cattle, and industry was very excited about an external application measure, trisulfan, that has been widely adopted, and the MLA was investing in a cheek implant, or which I'm always fascinated by, big yards and big mobs.
Yeah.
Exactly how that was going to work, and the saliva test feels a little like that all over again. So I just hope it's going to be something that is suitable to be used in a safe manner, of course.
Yeah. Senator, I imagine it does, and
because we're now talking head bales.
Yep,
we're
I
talking
understand.
people. We're talking anyway.
But we've got to be able to bridge the gap, right?
measurements.
So we've got to find a way to get there, and I think our challenge is that it's easy to paint a picture that seems unattainable. It's important for us in supporting the industry and saying if this is somewhere where the industry wants to go, where there's benefit in the industry going here, how do we help them get there from here? And
I think it's important. It's only one of the
things. That's a very good
There's
point.
a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, Senator Bush-Wilson, can I get an indication of how long you may need? Sure.
5 minutes.
Thanks, Senator.
Actually, Senator McDonald asked most of my questions, which were very similar to what I asked Dairy Australia. But I was interested in particular, Mr. Strong, the Asparagopsis trials. I've obviously been asking questions about this for many years. Through MLA, there was a trial funded and conducted with Asparagopsis. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's been quite a number of them, Senator, yes.
Yeah, so where are we at exactly? Because I understand you've reduced the size of the herd involved in the trial. Like it was, the original commitment was for several hundred head of cattle, but it's like 60 or something now? Or?
There's actually quite a number of trials underway,
Right,
Senator,
okay.
and the majority of those trials underway now are late stage R&D, early stage adoption demonstration programs, and decisions are being made between the providers of the supplement and the commercial operators as to the size of those trials, and I think we can understand that'll be a bit of a moving feast as people work out how might we then use this, how might it be applied, what else might it mean as far as the delivery mechanism or the...
So the new money that the Minister announced recently across for a lot of different products and different trials for different products, how will that add, any of that be taken up by MLA trials or members or research and development?
So largely not, from what I understand so far, largely not directly with MLA, so it'll be new in addition to what we're doing, and we won't reduce any of our efforts as a result of that. But what it does is it broadens that pool and hopefully broadens the number of participants as well. So the demonstration piece about the benefit should be broadened as a result of that.
So how many head of cattle are working on the demonstration piece with
in total, I'm not sure, Senator. We could get a summary for you and get that back to you. And we'll just do an aggregation of the number of head that have been through the trials using Asparagopsis over time for you, if you like.
In relation to Senator McDonald's questions about feedlots, 100 days, intensive might be 400. Obviously, there are some countries like the US that have a lot more intensive feedlot. Australia's kind of free-range cattle, if I could call them that. If these products are verified and they work and there's confidence in their application, are we going to struggle to kind of match some of these other countries? They're going to get ahead of us in terms of moving towards zero carbon for cattle and beef beef consumption?
I don't think they will, Senator. I think we're far enough ahead in the activities that have already been done and what we know and what we're investing in. And I think the point is very relevant, and hopefully we'll get the message to Senator McDonald afterwards as well, that we do appreciate the extensive nature of so much of our production. And even though about half of our turn-off is now coming through feedlots, even in a short term for the supermarkets and otherwise, but it is still only a short component of their life. But a number of the things that we are investing in to look at delivery mechanisms for the supplements, and whether that be Asparagopsis or others, are things like lick blocks. So using the lick block as a delivery mechanism for a product which will reduce their methane, but also biopolymers. So a ruminant implant which would be biodegradable over time, which would have a slow release.
It's like a slow release version, which is
yep.
what Dairy Australia meant. Yeah,
And there's evidence of those technologies being used for other things. So
Yep.
for bloat control, for example, Rumensin is delivered through a bloat capsule which manages that. So the same sort of technology. That's right. So there's also a project with UQ looking at using medicated water, for want of a better term, but using a supplement in the water to as a delivery mechanism, and that mechanism. So these aren't new technologies. So slow release boluses aren't new technology. Lick blocks aren't new technology as a delivery mechanism for supplements and other things. And there's already in Northern Australia, there's many systems set up for the delivery of nutrients and supplements through water systems. So.
Okay. Any idea on when, I know it's a big question, perhaps you could take it on notice, any idea on when these kind of things would be commercially viable, either proven to be commercially viable or not, in terms of what you want to use them for?
So I think there's two big drivers on the commercial viability. So demonstrating benefit, impact, result. I think we're well down that path. But the big drivers on commercial viability will be other benefits, so performance enhancement, for example, or market demand. And that market demand might come in the form of product claims, or it might come in the form of market access, for example.
Sorry if I'm moving really fast, because I know I've only got another minute or two left. My question was also similar to Senator McDonald. Look, given that perhaps these supplements don't have any direct productivity benefit to the cattle, but they are reducing methane, how do you anticipate you'll get sufficient uptake amongst your members for these products? Is it kind of a marketing race to having zero carbon cows in a competitive market? How do you see this actually getting enough rollout to be significant?
I think it's the productivity gains.
It is productivity gains? Okay, in what sense, Mr.
90%.
So 90% reduction in methane, but then
and 10%.
10% increase in productivity in some of the feedlot trials.
Right. Okay.
Pretty substantial.
But they're,
because of the
but they're also part of the suite of solutions. So
right. Well, that was my next question. You could perhaps take it on notice. Obviously, what percentage of your market is organic at the moment? Organic beef. I see some of it on the supermarket shelves as marketed, as verified.
They're very, very small.
Very
Senator.
small?
So single-digit percentages. So even in, I'm not exactly sure what it is in Australia, but it's certainly single-digit percentages. There's a couple of significant brands. So there's two significant brands.
Macro would be one of them, I think.
Well, from a marketing point of view, it is, but from a supply point of view, OB Beef and Arcadian are the two biggest commercial brands. But it's still a very small, single-digit percentage of our production.
So obviously another way of reducing methane and fertiliser inputs and a number of things will be through biodynamic or organic farming or regenerative agriculture in general. So I don't have time to ask you any detail about those, but I'm guessing it's a fairly small percentage of the market across the country at the moment.
Yeah, it is a good and interesting point, Senator. Yes is the short answer to that, but the longer version is that increasing productivity from a reducing impact on the environment will likely have a greater impact in reducing that impact, because we can produce more kilos from the same number of animals, for example.
We've discussed this before. My father used to breed Black Angus down in Tasmania, so and I used to fertilise his paddocks from time to time, if not every year, or he'd rotate that. But have you had any concerns amongst your members about transparency of fertiliser prices between the imported fertiliser prices versus retail prices? They're going through the supply chain. Obviously, you've got distributors and then you've got retailers. Has this been an issue that any of your members have raised in terms of?
Not in any significant number with us, Senator. There's such a broad range of production systems, and in the more intensive environments like where Alan is, it's a much bigger issue. Whereas in some of the extensive environments, there's probably not an issue at all as far as fertiliser use is concerned.
Would you like to see transparency around import prices or beachhead prices versus retail prices? It sounds like there's not a lot of information available as to what the big fertiliser. I mean, some of it's obviously made here, but other products are imported. But there's not a lot of information around.
I think we've got enough challenges on our plate at the moment without wading into that one as well.
No, okay, I might put something to you in more detail on notice on that.
Are your members at all concerned about by the end of this year we will not make urea in this country, and which is also the precursor for AdBlue, which I'm sure many of your members rely on? Are there any concern there? Have you been involved in discussions with the government about securing adequate supplies of urea or AdBlue?
So we're aware of the conversation, Senator, but we haven't been directly involved with them. We're aware that the representative organisations are very focused on those things, and of course if there's anything we can do to support the information that they need to execute those arguments, then we're more than happy to help.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Senator Wishwaston. Thank you, Senator Canavan. Mr Beckett and Mr Strong, thank you very much. We'll let you go and we'll call Riddick. But while Riddick comes to the table, and I want to take this opportunity that I've reflected upon my words earlier today, and Senator Mackenzie, I would want to apologise for my outburst under the pressure. There is no excuse for the language that I used, and I hope that you will accept my apology. It was unlike me, but I'm not dodging it. It was out of order.
Thank you.
On that, can we now call Riddick? And
thank you, Chair.
Ms Hull, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Can I just get an indication, Senators, of who's got questions? So, no, none, okay.
Do you have some?
No.
Okay.
Senator
I have
Mackenzie.
some questions.
Okay. So thank you.
It's a long way to drive.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to commence with an apology from the Managing Director, Director John Harvey. He's on leave at the moment. I have with me this afternoon Acting Managing Director Louise Heaslip, Manager of Corporate Services, and General Manager Business Development, Mr Michael Beer. Just to give you a statement up front, AgriFutures has 13 levied industries and 8 industry panels. Reddick was decentralised to Wagga Wagga and completed that decentralisation in December 2016. The Managing Director was appointed in May 2016 and I, as Chair, was appointed in August 2016. We developed a new 5-year plan that was fully focused on our levied industries and delivering a greater return on investment to our levy payers and beyond the farm gate. We believe our levy payers and their knowledge is the key to the nation's future in food and fibre. Over our 5-year plan, it concluded in June. Some highlights of the 5-year plan delivery include bringing 3 new industries into the levy payer system, being export fodder, tea tree and thoroughbreds. Some examples of the success, some of the successes of our focus is in the following. We consulted extensively on a name change, including holding 7 regional innovation conversations across Australia. A brand change to AgriFutures Australia was the result of that consultation. We conducted a review into the performance of AgriFutures in the eyes of the levied industries and other stakeholders we represent, resulting in a change to the way in which we listen, communicate and respond to the needs of our levy payers and industries. We introduced the Emerging National Rural Industries Process, titled ENRI, designed for cross-collaboration between RDCs, with some 100 projects having been introduced in that process. We established the Ignite Network for the development of professionals interested in agriculture, established the Levied Industries and Panel Chairs Forum to listen and learn from our industries each year and to establish connectivity between our panels and our levied industries. We've revamped the Rural Women's Awards to now achieve sell-out events celebrating amazing women. The revenue then being put to running a parallel program aimed at building capacity and confidence in women. In addition, we established the Rural Women's Alumni Program. We've developed an Expo initiative to expose the innovation and the technology that's being developed within agriculture within Australia, to expose it to investors and to those involved in production and associated with agriculture industries. That Expo is titled Evoke Ag. We delivered the inaugural Evoke Ag in Melbourne in 2019 with 1,200 registered attendees, including international trade delegations. A significant deal flow emanated from the Evoke Ag Expo 219. Then in 2020, a sellout of 1,400 registered attendees with significant international exposure to the international markets and further deal flow for startups in innovation, along with initiatives like blockchain technology for tea tree oil to assist in the protection from adulteration. COVID has shut us down in 21 and 22, but we are again focused on delivering Evoke Ag in Adelaide in February 23. We've developed an online platform to complement Evoke Ag titled Grow Ag. It's designed as a global gateway to Australia's RDCs and to the R&D and it currently hosts 2,500 projects with over 100 commercial opportunities. The Grow Ag platform has won the Nintex Global Innovation Award, and AgriFutures has just won a prestigious place in the Australian Financial Review Most Innovative Companies Awards. We introduced the Pilot Producers Uptake Program in order to support producer groups to trial and encourage adoption of technology solutions on farm. Our new 5-year plan that was accepted by the Minister in August and is focused on our industries, emerging industries, workforce and leadership, national challenges and opportunities, and global innovation networks. AgriFutures undertook a significant consultation process on the next 5-year plan, including a pre-survey, 13 online workshops, a follow-up survey, and they all were targeted at our levied industries and other associated stakeholders. I've made my decision to retire from AgriFutures on December 9th, and I'm proud that AgriFutures Australia is a wonderful example of how governments can deliver successful decentralisation and more opportunities to regional Australia. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Hull.
Excuse me, Chair, just before you go to questions, could I just put on the record my gratitude on behalf of the government to Ms Hull for her service over a number of years as the Chair of AgriFutures. I know it was a difficult decision for Ms Hull, the decision she's made, and we had a number of conversations about it, but we really appreciate the work that she's put in and wish her the very best in whatever she does next.
Thank you.
Particularly being a good grandparent, I think, by the sound of it. Thanks.
Thank you.
And the same from the committee too, Ms Hull. Thank you. Thanks, Minister. Senator McKenzie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms Hull, for your service to regional Australia and to agriculture over your long time in public life. And AgriFutures has been quite an innovative RDC and has had needed a leader that can actually bring people together and have a strong voice, which you've been able to achieve, which is amazing. So go well.
Thank you, Senator McKenzie.
From all of us.
Thank you.
I just want to go, thank you for getting your I've become the annual report taskmaster today. Great to see your annual report on time and hopefully on budget. I just wanted to go to section 4, 1.2. When I'm looking at industry levies, and there's been quite an increase from 2021 to 2022, almost a doubling, shall we say. Can somebody talk me through how that happened? Was it a levy increase that I don't know about, or COVID?
No, Senator, I can respond to that one. So our total levies through the business were just over $6 million in 21-22.
Yes.
And that was largely driven by production increases.
Right.
And in addition, Rice actually doubled their levy They were the hardest hit industry throughout the drought years and the lack of water, but chose to invest in the industry by doubling their levy from $3 to $6. And I think that was an amazing performance on the rice industry's behalf.
So what proportion of AgriFuture's levies, total levies, come from the rice industry?
I'll have that right here. It's actually in the appendix, Senator, in the annual report, but I'll just find it quickly. Having trouble finding that. 2.5 million, Senator.
So, what, 40%?
Yeah, would
Yes.
be.
About 40%?
Yeah.
Okay, so would you categorise the increase from 3.8 million in 2021 to an increase in 6.1 by 21-22 to be predominantly that the rice growers increase in levy?
Yes, that would be the main driver. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. In the interest of time, I know we've still got two more agencies we want to speak to. Thank you and go well, and I'll put the rest of my questions on notice.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
Thank you. But I think, before you, Senator Wish-Wilson just has a couple of quick ones.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. Could you give us an update on developments in hemp, the hemp market?
Michael? Oh, transferred Michael.
Yeah, industrial hemp falls within our emerging industries portfolio.
Sorry, you just might want to identify yourself.
Sorry, Michael Beard, General Manager, Business Development, AgriFutures. Industrial hemp does fall within our emerging industries program. We've recently...
But not food hemp, or like hemp for food, or when you mean industrial hemp, do you mean
those uses
for construction, or
those uses outside medicinal, Senator. Yeah.
So that includes food.
It does.
Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, food and industrial use. Yes. We've recently looked at a forecast for expenditure over the next 5 financial year periods of 2.5 million in total for that period. We've worked through an industry prioritised RD&E plan, and we're currently reviewing that to look at how those priorities fit within that investment budget. We've done that with external consultants assisting those peak industry organisations and other stakeholders within the hemp industry to bring them along in identifying those particular priorities.
Okay, so what are those priorities? Could you just give us a quick overview?
They range. They range from things like breeding and genetics through to agronomy, pest and disease control, to value-add products and alternative uses like grazing of hemp.
And I noticed you're not in any way linked to ARC funding, are you? Or funding from the ARC, because I noticed they've recently put $500,000 into a genetic study.
No, not directly, Senator. ARC opportunities generally come through our research organisations such as universities, and we work in close cooperation with some of those universities to co-invest in programs that their scholarship holders might undertake.
So with the report I've got here, developing a Northern Australia industrial hemp industry value chain, which is only a couple of months ago. Excellent report, may I say. My first question as a southerner is why you focused on Northern Australia, given obviously there's already quite a well-established and fledgling hemp industry in places like Tasmania. Well, what was the decision, what was the thinking around that?
I might address that directly. It's recognised that particularly Northern Australia have got a number of challenges with identifying particularly varieties that will suit that climatic condition, and also just due to their geographic positioning, their relative isolation and their different infrastructure, particularly their access to water and other natural resources, that there's a particular challenge in the north. And we've also located within our national variety trials in industrial hemp trial sites in that particular region. So it made sense for us to investigate what some of those particular challenges are for the Northern Territory, but could be applicable anywhere north of the tropics.
Right, well, listen, I think you want to go to lunch, don't you?
No, we want to go to APVMA.
Oh, okay, all right, no worries. Look, I've got some questions about the recommendations of that report, but I'll put them to you on notice and look forward to following them up with you.
Thank you.
And thanks for upping the ante on this particular industry. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for having us, Chair.
Good luck. Thank you very much.
See you
And we
later.
just call Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority.
Good job.
And I welcome officers from APVMA, and I'm sorry about the timing, and I probably won't ask you, well, I definitely won't ask you for an opening statement. I'll just give the opportunity for senators to ask some questions, should they have any, if that's all right.
Yes, Dr. Hilliard does actually have an opening statement, but we could just table it if you...
If you wouldn't mind, I think, because we do want to go to questions. Thanks very much, Doctor, for your patience and your cooperation. Yeah, send the caravan.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for appearing today. I just wanted to go to questions of staff locations. How many members of the APVMA, or how many members of your staff, are not located in Armidale?
So we have, Lisa Croft, CEO of the APVMA. We have 150 staff who are Armidale based and 43 who are Canberra based.
Okay, thanks. How many of those 43 are from your executive team?
One.
Only one of the 43?
Sorry, do you mean senior executive team?
Yeah, from the
executive
SES,
team?
let's say. So SES
Yes, one.
classified, only one SES staff is not based in Armidale.
Is not an Armidale-based position, yes.
Living in
Sorry.
Armidale.
Yeah, sorry.
So-
Can
Sorry,
I
'cause
just,
they
can I
can
just,
work
yeah.
from home.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
APS
let's be
can
very
work wherever
clear
they are.
here.
Yes.
So how many of those 43, how many of the 43 that aren't Armidale based, well, let's ask it again, because I think we might be having different definitions here.
Yes.
How many of your SES staff, how many SES staff do you have, and how many do not live in Armidale?
We have 5 SES staff and 2 do not live in Armidale.
So the other 3 do?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, as long as you count the Armidale region. So, for
Yeah,
example,
okay.
I
We do.
live in the region, the New
Yeah.
England region, but I don't live in Armidale.
Yeah, but okay,
Yes.
that's clear. I'm just going to a position that was recently advertised for board secretary.
Yes.
Where is the location for that position?
The position was advertised as Armidale or Canberra based.
Right. I mean, given your location is in Armidale, why would that not be required to live there or be based there?
It depends, Senator, on the nature of the roles, but depending on the role, we advertise some as Canberra-only positions, Armidale-only positions, or Canberra or Armidale positions, depending on the skills and experience we're trying to attract, and also where the other staff members that relate to those positions might also be located.
Have you employed somebody in that role?
Yes, we have.
And where are they? Where do they live?
They live in Broken Hill.
Right. Okay. And they're going to travel to Armidale regularly, or?
Yes, so our flexible work policy allows people to travel and attend the office so many days a month. and so the occupant of that position can attend either the Canberra or Armidale office
How
to
many
fulfil
days
their
that is?
requirements. 4 days a month.
Right, okay. I noticed too that a position of Director of Parliamentary Communications is also being advertised.
Yes.
What's the location for that role?
I believe it's been advertised as Canberra or Armidale. Senator.
Okay. Again, what's the reasoning for that? I mean, particularly a cause person too. Wouldn't you want them located where most of your staff are and they can talk to them?
It depends, again, Senator, on the position, but it is really about attracting somebody with the relevant skill set, and there is a candidate pool that is probably more relevant to that role, having advertised it as Canberra or Armidale.
Right, and have you filled that position?
I believe it's in the marketplace now. We haven't
Okay.
filled it, yes.
Are there any positions recently you've advertised for, let's say in the last 6 months, that have just been Armidale based?
I would say yes,
Could
quite
you
a
take that on
significant
notice?
proportion. Yes, we could.
And just provide us those positions if you can
Yes.
on that in that answer. Are there any plans to bring the APVMA back to Canberra?
No, Senator.
Okay, they've had no discussions with the government in regards to that?
No, Senator.
Okay, all right. Just moving on. I just want to go to, there's been some concerns expressed to me about a potential lack of supply of 1080 for wild dog baiting. I think a lot of these concerns seem to relate to the Queensland government's decision to no longer have a stockpile of 1080. Have you had any discussions with farmers or land care organisations about concerns about supplies of 1080?
Might refer to Dr. Lutzi.
Dr. Jason Lutzi, Deputy CEO, APVMA. Those concerns haven't been brought to us, Senator.
They haven't been?
No.
Okay.
Are you aware of them?
No.
Okay,
We are aware of the Queensland stockpile being depleted.
Yeah.
And have you done any sort of assessment on what that would mean?
No, we haven't. We're not responsible for the actual supply. Senator.
Yeah, I realise
we
that.
get that.
I'm going to come to something that might overlap with your responsibilities. On the 30th of August last year, an ABC article was published about this issue. I won't read the full headline, it's quite lengthy. It raised, or someone was raising the point that if they have to commercially purchase 1080 rather than rely on the Queensland Government stockpile, they have to use it in line with label instructions from the APVMA, which apparently require the injection of 1080, whereas apparently the Queensland Government just says here they just roll it in a cement mixer and spray it with a toxin. That's the bait meat. So can you at all relay to me what are the requirements that the APVMA put on the use of 1080 products and how that might compare with any Queensland Government practices, if you're aware of them?
There are a number of permits that we have issued for 1080 for wild pig control. I think
I'm talking about wild dogs and pigs, but
sorry,
wild animals. Is it
wild
the
animal
same?
control?
Yep, right.
They are for use in a number of different bait matrices.
Yep.
I think given the number that we do have, we can take that question on notice.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No, that's reasonable. Thank you for that. I have no further questions for the APVMA.
Senator Whish-Wilson, we've got 5 minutes left, so the time is.
And we've got
is
potentially one more. But,
Yeah. Will we have one? Will
Yeah,
you want to
come back.
No, that's it. That's the end of the day.
Oh, righto. Okay.
You can take the full 5 minutes if you want.
Right. Okay. Thank you. When's the next census? The next census due? I understand it was scheduled for June, but it hasn't been released for staff.
Are you talking about the APS census
Yeah.
results?
Yeah.
It was conducted, I think, in May.
In May. So when's it going to be released?
I understand across the Commonwealth they're being released in November, late November.
For November. So no problem. Look, I had quite a few questions around chemical assessments, which I'll put on notice. And some organisational issues, which I'll also put on notice. Could I ask you, in relation to your 2021 census. In page 20 of the 2021 census reflects on harassment and bullying, but it's notable that sexual harassment is not explicitly referenced. Would the incidences of sexual harassment be potentially included in this section?
I believe so, Senator. It would depend. It is a census and people respond from their personal experience. So if somebody had experienced sexual harassment, I would imagine they would have captured that in those results, provided they, I guess, responded to the census.
So since the move to Armidale, has there been any reports of sexual harassment at the office there?
I would have to take it on notice, Senator.
Okay. If you could take that on notice and how they've been followed up and investigated. And can you tell us, are there any current investigations in relation to incidences of sexual harassment?
No, not with the APVMA that I'm aware of, no.
You're not aware of any complaints or internal reports?
We do not have any complaints that I am aware of, and I believe we have no complaints with the Fair Work Commission or the. Yes, I'm not aware of any complaints currently.
Okay. I've been told about an incident occurred at a staff Christmas party in 2021 in which a male senior staff member allegedly urinated on other staff members. Was such an incident reported to you, and if so, was any action taken?
I am not aware of it in that context, not at a Christmas party and
at any party then, or any work function?
I am aware of an incident that occurred in a private capacity. Not at a work function, no, Senator.
In a private capacity?
Mm-hmm.
So how were you made aware of that then, if it was in a private capacity?
Individuals raised the matter with me directly.
Okay. Did any individuals raise a matter in relation to that staff member around sexual harassment as well, with you directly or with anyone else at APVMA?
I would have to take that on notice if you're asking about the APVMA more broadly.
Well, I'm asking you directly right here, right now, as CEO. I understand potentially there was 3 complaints from 3 different female staff in relation to that staff member. Are you aware of any complaints directly?
I am not aware of any complaints from those staff members in relation to a sexual harassment matter.
Any kind of bullying or other forms of harassment from that particular staff member associated with a private urination incident?
I'm aware of that matter, Senator, yes.
Okay. And why was that raised with you directly if it was in a private capacity?
I understand that the people directly involved wanted me to be aware of the matter. There was no official complaint made.
There was no official complaint made?
No.
Yet they felt like they needed to raise it with you.
Yes.
As CEO. That sounds like a pretty serious matter if someone's prepared to raise that with you directly. What action did you take in relation to those concerning reports?
There was discussions with our human resources team, and the staff member is no longer with us.
Was the staff member dismissed or did they leave voluntarily?
The staff member resigned.
Okay.
Hang on, sorry. So to the media, sorry, we do have standing orders, okay? Firstly, do you have any problem having your photo taken?
No, Senator.
Doctor, are you okay with your photo being taken? Okay. Okay, click away. Sorry, Senator Whish-Wilson.
So after it was raised with you, you brought it up with Human Resources, and was a process put in place?
Discussions were had in terms of what
may be able to be done in relation to the matter. And the staff member resigned very soon after that.
Okay. Did you speak to the staff member directly?
Not
the
about
incident?
that incident, no. No, I did not speak to that person about that incident.
At all?
Not prior to their resignation, no.
Okay. Why would you have spoken to them following their resignation? Were they a friend of yours? Or an acquaintance of yours?
They were a member of the agency and we're a relatively small team.
I beg your pardon?
They were a member of the executive team and we're a relatively small agency, so...
Okay. I'll put some more detailed questions to you on notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bush-Wilson. So thank you very much. That's now the time that's concluded today's estimates round. Minister, thank you very much. Mr Metcalfe, to you and all your crew, thank you very much.
Really, really quickly, can I just say that they are obviously very concerning questions. Certainly the first time I've heard about any of them, and I'll be seeking an urgent briefing from my department about it.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Okay, and to Secretariat, to Jerry and your team, thank you so much. Hansard and Broadcasting, thank you once again. That concludes today's hearing. The committee now stands adjourned. Thank you.